Somehow I found a spot on the tunnel with enough service to hopefully get this out. I'm holding on to this singular bar for dear life. My situation is growing dire. I'm running out of gas, which also means that I won't be able to charge my phone. The only food that I have is a bag of Sour Patch Kids, a box of Cheez-Its, 2 Red Bulls, and about a half-gallon of water. Let me explain what's going on. I'm a traveler, always have been. I'm used to cross-country road trips. I'm located in the United States, driving for hours through the night without stopping, except to use the restroom or grab a quick meal. I'm currently making the trek from Los Angeles to Chicago. I've done this trip before, but I took Route 66 that time for the hell of it. This time, I opted to take the interstates, a shorter ride and a way that I hadn't taken before. This way cuts through the middle of the country, passing through Colorado and Nebraska and Iowa. The drive was going normal, lots of nothingness. I'm used to going hours without seeing any other cars, or people for that matter, when I'm driving out here. And by the time I'm writing this, I've been driving for close to 3 days. And last night I slept in a Walmart parking lot somewhere in Colorado, I think Frisco. I drove for over 14 hours straight yesterday, only stopping a couple of times at gas stations to grab snacks and take a piss and then refuel. I grabbed dinner at a Taco Bell at like midnight before I crashed. I'm recounting every detail because I'm hoping that maybe this whole thing could be explained away by a lack of sleep and nutrition. I know that I should be eating and sleeping more, but I just don't think about it when I'm on the road. I don't think about anything. That's why I love these trips so much. Anyways, I woke up this morning at the crack of dawn, like 6 a.m. in Colorado, which is 5 a.m. my time, and I continued on my way. I wanted to make good time. Not for any reason, it's not like I had plans. I just wanted to see how quickly I could drive so far. I grabbed breakfast at a local cafe, a bagel and a coffee, filled up on gas, and grabbed some Red Bulls, some beef jerky, and a gallon of water, and then I headed out. I don't think I stopped driving until like 6 hours in, when I realized that I was gonna piss myself from all the energy drinks that I chugged. I tend to space out until it's nearly too late. I stopped at the first gas station that I saw. 2 measly gas pumps and a rundown old wooden shack for a convenience store. I was somewhere coming up in Kearney, Nebraska, and I had endured another time change, so it was now around 2 p.m. I walked inside and the bell on the door jingled. The man at the cash register jumped, startled by the first sign of life other than his own cigarette-soaked breath. I asked him if they had a restroom and he grinned. "Oh, there's a bucket out back, princess," he said, stifling a chuckle. I stared at him blankly, waiting for a punchline. He sighed and handed me a tarnished key attached to a piece of wood, which had been roughly etched with pisser. He pointed to a door at the far end of the shack. I did my business, though the toilet looked like it hadn't been cleaned since before I was born, and returned the key to the man at the register, who I now noticed had a name tag that read, Gus. I turned to leave, but before I could, Gus cleared his throat and asked me, "So where are you headed?" I told him Chicago, and he said, "What for?" I told him that I didn't really know. "Just to go, I guess." His eyes lingered on me for a moment, almost an uncomfortable amount of time, and then he quickly glanced about the shack before he said, "Well, if you can spare a couple hours, I know a sick scenic route through the peaks a bit further north." He went on to tell me that this way was only really known to locals, winding through Nebraskan peaks with plenty of lookouts over whatever the hell is in Nebraska. Historically home to booze-filled high school parties, romantic illegal camping rendezvous, and of course, its fair share of local folklore legends, like the classic, teen lovers murdered during a makeout sesh and the killer was never caught type of stuff. It's not like a story really piqued my interest. It's the same stuff you hear about every random scenic route and lookout and every random small town. But that's exactly why I chose to embark upon Gus's route. I'm always so curious to explore the places that locals know and adore, and all of the random small towns that I wind up in along my travels. It makes me realize how connected we really are, no matter where we are in the world, and we live out these parallel lives, experiencing emotions and struggles that so many other people also experience in their own ways. I love finding these spots. I love feeling connected with something, anything. He gave me some crude directions, but it seemed simple enough. Continue up Interstate 80 for an hour or two longer until I see a turnoff, a dirt road to my left. You can't miss it. That'll take me where I need to go according to Gus. I figured that if I didn't see a turnoff, I would just take the loss. After our conversation, I decided to purchase some snacks. Sour Patch Kids, Cheez-Its, and 2 more Red Bulls, and a pack of menthols. I filled up on gas again before leaving. I wasn't sure when the next gas station would be, especially if I found Gus's route, and I continued on my way. I lit a cigarette as I began this next leg of my journey. My mother would kill me for smoking in my car. She'd kill me for a lot of the stuff I do when I take these trips. One thing that I started to learn is that Nebraska is full of corn and wheat. In all directions, all I could see were miles and miles of farmland, stalks waving in the wind like a sorry excuse for an ocean. Interstate 80 was surrounded, crops creeping onto the shoulders of the road, refusing to adhere to man-made perimeters. The stalks grew high above my SUV, making it so I could see nothing beyond the confines of my weedy, corny prison. I had been driving for about 2 hours since the gas station when I saw it, a break in the crops to my left. Gus was right, I couldn't miss it. The dirt road stood out like a beacon, a sudden relief from my engulfment. I didn't feel any hesitation to take the path. In fact, I was excited that I had actually stumbled across it. As I made the turn, I could almost feel the stories, the experiences of the people who had made this turn before me. Every local has their spots. In every big city, every small town, every single person has a place that is special to them. A coffee shop, a hiking trail, a park. Somewhere they have left pieces of themselves. I want to leave pieces of myself everywhere. The dirt road cut through the fields heading north. Far ahead of me I could see a small range of peaks and hills. Nothing compared to California's mountain ranges, but at least it wasn't flat, unlike everywhere else out here. After driving through more and more miles of farmland, eventually I started to ascend. The road curved to my right at the base of the closest peak, turned from dirt into old battered pavement, and I began a twisty-turny ride up and up. As I got higher up the peak, I could see what Gus was talking about. The views were incredible. Plots of farmland, a quilt that covered the earth in greens and tans and yellows. I lit another cigarette and slowly continued my drive. I stopped at a couple of lookouts, just random turnoffs on the side of the road, taking in my surroundings. You can find beauty in anything if you try, even Nebraskan wheat fields. I felt like a local. The road was nothing special, similar to most mountain roads that I've taken before. Nothing stood out really, besides some empty bottles and beer cans in the brush. I didn't see a single other person for the entirety of my drive, which I enjoyed. It was just me and the woods and the road. And then I entered the tunnel. I didn't think anything of it. Plenty of mountain roads cut through portions of the mountain itself, causing you to drive through a manufactured hole in the rock. I used to play a game as a kid where I would hold my breath until we had made it through to the other side. I'm glad I didn't try to hold my breath this time. I immediately noticed the tunnel was long. I couldn't see any light coming from the other end. The dirty orange bulbs hanging from the ceiling every 10 feet or so didn't make much of a difference in the pitch black. I drove for about 30 minutes, thinking to myself that this may be the longest tunnel that I've ever driven through. And then the lights started diminishing. They began popping up every 30 feet, then every 50 feet, then every 100 feet, and then there were none. I drove through the darkness for another 45 minutes, my headlights leading the way. I had been in the tunnel for over an hour now. It was close to 8 p.m. and I didn't see any signs of the exit. I decided to turn around. I didn't like being swallowed by darkness. The rock walls were closing in on me, reigniting my claustrophobic fears that consumed me as a child. I drove for an hour or so back the direction that I came. The lights should have started coming back by now, but they didn't. No orange bulbs. I drove for another hour and another, almost 3 hours driving back the way that I came, and I never made it back to the tunnel's entrance. I was never greeted by the warm glow of the dim bulbs. Maybe the lights had gone out. But even then, I should have been out of the tunnel hours ago by now. I started getting worried. I was confused. I had turned around, hadn't I? I remembered taking that 3-point U-turn in the narrow tunnel. I had been worried that my SUV wouldn't even be able to make the turn, and I was relieved when it had. I grabbed my phone, but of course, no service. And who would I even call? My angry mother, who would just chew me out for listening to a strange man at a gas station in the first place. I have no friends back home. I'm more inclined to spend my time alone. No relationships, besides an ex who wants me dead. I've only had myself for as long as I can remember. I left on this trip without telling anyone that I was leaving, let alone where I would be. Would anybody even notice that I was lost? My mind was racing, looking for a solution as I kept driving. Luckily, my car is good on gas. I was still at half a tank. I just kept going. What else was I supposed to do? After another 2 hours, I was desperate. My gas wouldn't last forever and it was dwindling fast. And when my car gave out, I wouldn't be able to charge my phone either. My only distraction from the void enveloping me was my downloaded Spotify playlist. I needed that to survive. I needed that so I didn't go crazy in here. Out of nowhere, while I was fiddling with my music, I saw a beacon of hope. One single bar. It popped up for a split second. I slammed on my brakes and reversed until I got to the sweet spot. At this point, I didn't care if my mother screamed at me so loud that it damaged my phone speaker. I needed to tell someone what was happening to me. I hovered over her contact for a few seconds before I sighed and clicked call. It didn't even ring. Just a horrific beeping that signified no service. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel, tears starting to well. I wasn't going to get stuck out here. I couldn't. My brain wouldn't even consider that an option. I grabbed my phone and got out of the car. An eerie whistling from the wind blowing through the tunnel filled my ears. I climbed on top of my car. Maybe if I stood up here, I could get a call out. It didn't work. The same disheartening beeping rang out over and over, and I groaned. I could feel the anxiety building, my heart pounding against my chest. And then I heard something. It was faint at first, like someone trying to stifle a cough. I thought that I imagined it. I stood there listening. And then it happened again, louder. It sounded like a playful shout, like maybe a teenager exploring the tunnel, hooting and hollering with their friends. This is what my mind had latched onto. Another sign of life meant that I could get out of here. I shouted back, "Hey, hey, hey." It echoed, bouncing off the cold rock walls, repeating over and over. And then it was uncannily quiet. The wind's whistling stopped and everything went still. All I could hear were my own panicked breaths. And then footsteps, hundreds of them, running, thumping footsteps, coming from both directions. It shook the ground and made my car wobble. Pebbles tumbled off the walls. I have never felt so weak, so exposed. I nearly broke a bone jumping off the roof of my car and stumbling into my driver's seat at what felt like the speed of light. I slammed the car door and locked it. I laid my seat all the way back and I pressed myself against it, wanting so badly to dissolve, to disappear. My car stopped swaying. The quiet returned. I laid there for what must have been an hour, maybe more. Tears caked my face and I couldn't stop shaking. I tried every breathing exercise that my therapist had taught me. Nothing could calm me. What the actual heck was that? I haven't moved. I'm still laying in my driver's seat typing this. It's almost 4 a.m. and I've been in this tunnel for almost 10 hours now. I thought that maybe if I sat down and wrote out everything that's happened so far, it would help me understand. I still don't understand, but it is helping me settle down. It's grounding me in my reality. Can someone please figure out where I am? Can someone tell me what's happening? How does a tunnel suddenly extend by miles? Did Gus know about all this? Is that why he sent me here? I'm paranoid. What do I do from here? I don't want to get out of my car again. What if they find me? Why did they stop running to me? Did I imagine it in my hungry, exhausted state? I don't think continuing to drive is a good option, but it's really the only option. Eventually, my gas is going to run out. Eventually, my phone is going to die for good. Eventually, I will starve or die of dehydration. I'm conserving the little food and drink that I have as much as I can. I'm freaking out. I'm so thankful that I bought these cigarettes. If anyone has any idea how to get out of this, please tell me. I'll try anything. If anything else happens in here, I'll keep you updated. I pray to God this pose. Hey, I'm still alive. Still in this godforsaken and dreary place. Thank you to everyone who replied to my post with advice, theories, anything. It's helping me feel less alone, reading and answering your comments. One thing that you guys suggested was that Gus may have laced something that I consumed. The snacks, the Red Bulls, or the cigarettes. And as scary as that would be, I was praying for that to be the case. I was holding on to hope that I would wake up today somewhere else. that this whole thing would be a hallucination brought on by some Nebraskan Hicks psychedelics. It wasn't. I fell asleep at like 8 this morning and kept awake all night by gripping fear. I woke up at 4 p.m. with a start, unsure if my terror was from something real or something that I had dreamed. Honestly, I usually awaken with a start. I have had chronic nightmares for as long as I can remember. I don't think my trepidation was caused by an outside force. Still in the tunnel, feeling the same as I did yesterday, I don't think that I was laced. Another response I kept seeing on my original post was that turning around was a mistake. If we take what Gus said literally, as many of you are, I have to continue through the tunnel to take me where I need to go. Maybe that's why the tunnel extended, keeping me inside until I turned back around. It wants to trick me. It's swallowing me like a pill. So when I woke up today, I turned back around, facing back through the tunnel, hopefully the correct way. My car was slowly running out of gas, less than a quarter tank left. I found a portable charger in my car, thank God that I charged up as I drove. I need as much time with you all as I can get. I need to feel like I'm still connected to civilization. Every 10 to 15 miles down the road, I would reach another service sweet spot. A split second of a bar before it disappeared once again. It's throwing me a bone. I watched as my gas sensor conspicuously made its way to E. I kept driving past empty for about 30 minutes until my car sputtered and came to a stop in the darkness. I had been driving for about 3 hours. My car stopped near where I had turned around yesterday, I think. I sat there unsure of what to do next, even though in my heart and in my mind I knew something that I was dreading. I had to start walking. This must be what it wants, for me to be exposed, no longer protected by the steel frame of my SUV, no longer able to hide or speed away at a sign of danger. I was avoiding giving the tunnel what it wanted. I was terrified that as soon as I stepped out of my vehicle, I would be swarmed by whatever was running at me yesterday. But I had no other choice. I packed a bag with the necessary supplies, all of my food and drink, my portable charger, a blanket, some warm clothes, and a journal and pen in case my phone dies before I get out of here. I still want to be able to document my journey. I also grabbed my emergency flashlight and some extra batteries. I even found an old flare in my car's tool bag, which I took with me. And of course, my cigarettes and a lighter. I sat there with my packed bag for a while, building up the courage to open my car door. I took a deep breath, counted down from 10, and on 1, I swung open my door and stepped out onto the road. The wind's eerie whistling surrounded me once again. I pointed my flashlight all around me. It was cold, dark, and damp. A liquid pooled at the base of the rock walls. There was nothing to do but start walking, and so I did. Leaving my precious vehicle behind was heartbreaking. That SUV is the one constant that I have in my life right now. I walked and walked. I knew that the last time I got a bar was about 2 miles before my car had stopped. That meant in 8 miles or so, I would hit another sweet spot, and that's where I would rest. It would probably take me about 3 hours of walking. My flashlight did hardly anything in the pitch black. I could see only about 10 feet in front of me, and only a small circle of light. The air felt heavy, It was getting hard to breathe. I jumped at every noise, pebbles that had happened to kick bouncing along the ground, water drip drops, even my own footsteps sometimes. I was constantly swiveling my light in all directions, glancing behind me every few seconds. Even though I couldn't see anything, I felt like I was being watched, as cliché as it was. I walked for about an hour and a half, telling myself that I was halfway to my rest point. I just had to keep pushing. I stopped for a second to retie my shoelaces. As I kneeled down, my flashlight fell out of my pocket and rolled to the other side of the tunnel, light aiming behind me. I watched the light as it rolled. The flashlight hit the wall opposite me with a metallic clank. The beam of light illuminated something pressed against the wall, about 10 feet behind me. A black shadow stood out against the shiny gray rock. It looked like the shape of a person, though elongated and wrong somehow. Someone standing with their face pressed against the wall, arms at their side. I inhaled sharply, trying to act as though I didn't see anything. I didn't want to acknowledge the shape. We all remember what happened last time I acknowledged a presence in this tunnel. I quickly finished tying my shoes and ran across the tunnel to grab my flashlight. I picked it up and continued briskly walking, away from the figure, away from the menacing mass that stuck to the rock like moss. My heart started racing once again, pounding so hard I worried the sound would echo. Was I being followed? And by what? I kept moving. It almost felt like I was floating. My legs were getting numb from the cold and the track. I made it to the rest point without another incident. I put on a sweater and I sat on the ground, my back up against the tunnel wall, wrapping myself in my blanket. The bar had appeared like a sign from God, and I started reading more of your comments, just to hear from someone. I guess eventually I started to hum. It's a habit that my mother had tried beating out of me when I was younger, but no amount of pummeling could stop the music in me. It was always random tunes that I couldn't really place. This time was no different. I hadn't even noticed the melody vibrating in my throat, not until I had heard it faintly from my left, further down the tunnel the way that I had walked from. I stopped my humming, but the tune didn't cease. It kept repeating and I grew more restless each time. A panic crept over me. I listened intently and realized that it didn't even necessarily sound human. It sounded forced, like whatever was repeating my humming had never hummed before. Crackling and gritty, hoarse. And then more joined in, from both directions. A distant choir that I couldn't see was repeating my nonsensical tune over and over. I started imagining what these pitiful tunnel demons could possibly look like. Did they appear as human, like I thought the shadow was? Or were they more animalistic? Would my death be quick at their hands? The humming was converging on me, getting closer and closer. I turned off my flashlight and I threw my blanket over my head, curling up into a ball, like a toddler avoiding the monster under their bed. I lay there with my eyes closed, focused on my breathing. In for 6, hold for 6, out for 6, just like my therapist had taught me. The ground trembled, the pebbles skittered around me, the wind picked up speed. After about 5 minutes, the humming came to an abrupt halt. Everything quieted suddenly. A single set of footsteps was approaching me slowly. I was shaking as I heard the figure coming up on me. I remained under my blanket, pressed against the ground and the wall. I scrunched my eyes closed and pictured myself somewhere, anywhere else. The footsteps stopped right in front of me. I sensed the figure lean down. I could hear it breathing directly above me. If this was it, then this was it. I accepted my fate. Drops of what I assumed were drool splattered onto the blanket. I heard something lick its lips. I held my breath and thought of every horrible thing that I had done throughout my life, and how I would never be able to fix it. How I never made amends with so many of the people that I had harmed. How my mother probably wouldn't even notice that I was dead, and if she did, she'd probably be relieved. Obviously, whatever it was didn't kill me. It stood there above me, salivating and clicking its tongue for a long time. Somehow, I fell asleep.
Wake up, wake up.
I was still wrapped in a blanket, clutching my flashlight and my phone. I had been awakened by that harsh whisper shout that rang in my ears, like when someone screams in a dream and it continues long after you open your eyes. I listened, but I heard nothing more. I slowly lifted the edge of the blanket and I peeked out. My eyes began adjusting to the darkness and I couldn't see any ominous shapes in my immediate vicinity. I bit my tongue and I turned on my flashlight, slowly lifting the blanket off of myself and shining my light in all directions. Nothing. Are they toying with me? Maybe they're like Stephen King's It. Maybe they want me to be afraid before they eat me, so I taste better. Are they even real? I saw that shape in the tunnel, but maybe it was a trick of the light. I heard the humming and I felt that figure looming over me, but maybe it was all in my head. My mother always told me that I was beyond help, that my paranoid tendencies would take over me until they killed me. Maybe that's all that's happening now. I keep trying to tell myself that none of this is real, that I'm just going crazy from hunger and exhaustion and cold and isolation. It's getting harder to convince myself of that though, especially now that I notice the dozen or so drops of blood littering my blanket. I think I slept for like 2 hours. It's almost 2 a.m. I'm about to start the 3-hour walk to my next resting point, my next bar. I have to keep moving. Until I can get back online, I'm hoping that some of you can help me. I don't think there's any point in figuring out exactly where I am. I don't want anybody else coming in here after me. I don't know if this tunnel is even real at this point, but maybe you guys can give me some ideas on how to proceed. Should I confront the figures the next time they make themselves known? Maybe acknowledging them is the only way that I can get out of here. Maybe I have to face my fears. What could they be? Ghosts, souls trapped in this tunnel, waiting for it to capture me next. Demons, monsters, deranged mountain people. Has anyone encountered or heard of something like this before? I have a lot of time to think in here. I've been running through every possible scenario. Anyways, thanks for being here. Even if you can't offer me any guidance, just interacting with me is helping me feel more sane. Hopefully you'll hear from me again. The Journal of June Smithers. Day 4. Phone died. I think batteries drain faster in here. I don't know what time it is, there's no way to tell. I didn't come across any more service spots after the last post that I made anyway. I'm writing in my journal to keep me sane. I am not dead yet. I saw the creatures last night after I walked for hours, maybe even days. They were suddenly illuminated by my flashlight in the dark, lining the sides of the tunnel just watching me. At least I think, and they didn't have eyes. They probably evolved to be rid of them after centuries in the tunnel. That had to be it, right? They hummed my tune again softly, almost indistinguishable from the whistling of the wind. They were human-like, but dark gray, veiny, skinny, tall, limbs slightly too long. Again, no eyes and just small holes for a nose and ears. Where was the mouth? The mouth. I walked past them all, backs pressed flat against the tunnel walls with their arms pinned to their sides. I passed hundreds of them, noticing more and more features. Huge flat feet planted firmly to the ground. Long sharp fingernails on fingers with at least 5 knuckles. One of its own standing in the middle of the tunnel blocking my path. It's back to me. I stopped. Should I speak? I stood there watching it for some time, debating what I should do. I turned around. All of those things were now facing towards me, leaning and peering around each other. Their humming grew louder. I looked back to the one standing in front of me. It too faced me now. I gasped, overtaken by its putrid, gasoline smell and its slimy, featureless face. And then it started splitting. Its skin was pulling and ripping apart. Dark blood oozed as its flesh tore. The mouth. It opened wide and I looked inside, deep, deep inside. And I saw everything. The answer. Day 5. I'm writing this in my journal to keep me sane. I'm going crazy in here. Never-ending darkness, the same tunnel walls, the same puddles and pebbles, the same strange noises echoing through this hollow tomb. Get me out. Get me out. I'm afraid I've seen too much, that they won't let me leave now that I know things. I know what they are, what I am, and what we are. Collective consciousness. Nothing matters. Everything is meaningless. Or is everything full of meaning? I'm not making sense. I need to conserve my light. Day 6. I understand now. I cannot leave. This is where I'm meant to be. I ended up here for a reason. They never wanted to hurt me. They wanted to show me. I am more than this body, this life. I am more than a lost drifter, constantly searching for meaning, for a place that I belong. I was right. We are all connected, except we aren't living parallel lives. We are all living the same life in different universes. In one universe, we are me, and in another, we are you. We are everyone all at once. When I looked inside, the mouth, I saw everything. I saw every human experience, everything you've ever done, everything anyone's ever done. I possess the knowledge that comes with having billions upon billions of life experiences. All of you have it too. You just need to look inside, deep inside. Just look inside. Day 7. I walk with them now. We hum together. My daughter's body was found by a hunter and his 2 young sons. She was somewhere in a Nebraskan wildlife management area. Poor kids were traumatized. My daughter was troubled. She dealt with paranoid delusions and manic depressive episodes throughout her life. She would often disappear for weeks at a time. I worried, of course, as any mother would, but I had called the cops to report her missing so many times, just for her to show back up at home a couple of weeks later. The cops stopped taking me seriously after the 15th time, and I don't blame them. June, my daughter, was lost. A lonely, sick young woman who wandered the planet like a ghost. Please don't go looking for this tunnel that she was clearly so obsessed with in her final days. There was no tunnel anywhere near her body. She was found dead in the woods, leaning against a tree. We still have yet to locate her car. She had gouged out her eyes with her bare hands. She had broken her own jaw so that her mouth hung open wide. Beside her, her journal with the entries that I uploaded here. I figured you all might appreciate the closure that these would provide. I don't want any of you thinking that she was still out there, and God forbid go looking for her, just to get as lost as she was. It was only a matter of time. I'm just glad that June finally felt connected to something when she passed. I feel connected too, ever since I identified her body at the morgue. Ever since I saw the mouth. Ever since I looked inside. October 4th, 2023. And this will be the 4th time that I've gone north for work, and I have to admit I'm more nervous about it than I've ever been years prior. I can't shake the feeling this voyage will be significant, but perhaps that is because I intend for it to be my last. My wife Lori and I are expecting a newborn girl soon, and this money will help us have a home for our new family. For this reason, I figure I should pass along all that I've learned to anyone else that might be also thinking of spending the next 6 to 8 weeks on a boat here. Some of these tips can likely be found on a million other posts just like this one, but it's good to be reminded, and it's even better if this is your first time. Here goes. And bring appropriate socks, ones that keep your feet warm and away from moisture. Okay, I cannot stress that enough. It's gonna be freezing and you don't want frostbite on your toes. And get plenty of them too. You're gonna be on your feet the majority of the time and you're gonna need to swap them out pretty often just to stay dry. If you can, get wool. And don't dress to impress. This is a dirty job. I remember one girl came in a pantsuit and hardly lasted a day and a half. Another time a guy brought his whole wardrobe. 4 suitcases. Ridiculous, really. Once you're out there to sea for 3 weeks or more, no one's gonna give a shit what you look like. If smoking tobacco, make sure to bring your own. And don't share. It's expensive up there and you ain't there to make friends. Remember, the day and night cycle is a little different in Alaska, and it's gonna take time for you to adjust. You're gonna have sleepless nights. You're gonna see things. I know I have. You're gonna meet a lot of idiots, but focus on the reason that you're there. It's a hard job working long hours and no contact with anyone in the world except your fellow deckhands. But it's worth it in the end for that paycheck. Find a captain that isn't a pushover and isn't trying to be the next Ahab. I know beggars can't be choosers, but there are literally tons of these jobs available and they hire anyone. I had a criminal record myself and the ship that I found a home with only asked a few basic questions. Like, could I withstand being on my feet for 15 hours a day? See, I told you the socks were important. And did I understand that this job was a matter of life and death? So be open and honest about any record that you have. It can go a long way to impress the companies who are basically giving you free room and board. My buddy Eddie said that he prefers doing the processing plants on land but not me. Most of those end up eating at your pocketbook with hidden fees and wasting time waiting for work. I like to get it done and get back home. The high seas are the place for me. I expect that I'll likely earn a little over $20,000 while I'm here, so it's worth the headache. I can basically be off my main job for half the year and still make a decent living. Now, of course, these are just your basic tips, and I guess it's not really fair to only share those and not include the basic day-to-day affairs of life. Make sure you bring some Dramamine patches to help you cope with the seasickness. Be prepared to be bored for the most part. There are some days that you may catch absolutely nothing, and others where you'll think it's the mother lode. That's just the job. It's unpredictable. On average, there are over 400 boats that go up the Bering Sea this time of year, so finding one isn't that difficult. Just grab a list of names and a dartboard and you can't go wrong. October 6th, the Silver Beauty. That's the ship that I got with last year. My crew of misfits that I had to call family for 2 months. I managed to sign up with them again this year, and I'm glad to not be the greenhorn. There's 6 of us aboard the ship this time, myself included, and while most ships need about double that many men aboard, we are the exception to every rule. I sailed with them last year and I nearly lost my life. That's because of an incident that happened while I was working on the cages. We actually lost one of our deckhands, Unlucky Pete. A crane malfunctioned and smashed his leg because he had pushed me out of the way. We were over 32 miles from shore, so he bled out. I was now the one that got that moniker, told that if it hadn't been for Pete, I would be crushed entirely. We couldn't even offer the poor sap anything for the pain, so we just laid in his cot and cried in agony until he died. As I board the ship, I can still hear his moans near that wretched piece of machinery, blaming me for living. I made sure to ask for a job further from the crane this year. October 11th. We are miles away from civilization now. Only the darkness of the ocean to comfort my disquieted thoughts. In case you didn't know, just about any sailor worth his salt is a little superstitious, and Captain Reich Sullivan is definitely more that way than most. Sully decided to take us over toward the Russian border where a lot of Opelio are nestled, but he did so near the beginning of the season, and that's when the storms are really rough. Still, we all knew that if we could catch a big load here, it might mean that we could take it easy during the colder weeks. Of course, that's honestly just wishful thinking because Sully works us twice as hard to get double the pay, with double the pain along the way. And ordinarily that's okay with me, but this time something was different. It started around day 4 of the early harvest. It was my turn to cast the line and haul up the cages, and the sea just wasn't cooperating. If you've ever been out there when this sort of wave hits, then you know that one false move can crush your whole body. And that's if you're fortunate. So there I was, wearing my full rain gear alongside the greenhorn of the year named Kent, trying my best to stay standing as the boat tipped and rolled. Kent wasn't doing so well with the different shifts in the water, which made it double the work for me to watch him and to handle the line. What normally took about 15 minutes was taking longer also because of the storm. And then finally we managed to lug the cage up, only to find it wasn't just crabs that we had brought up from the water. A crash of lightning illuminated the sky behind the cage to give us a better look at it. But even in that brief moment, it was difficult to really say for sure what it was. Hank, a senior deckhand, unlatched the cage and let the crabs spill out so that we could get a better look at our discovery. It's a corpse. Kent realized once we had managed to pull it from the mash. I shined a flashlight over it to confirm what he said, surprised to find that most of the flesh was blackened but still relatively fresh, as though the body had been mummified. "Captain on deck," Dylan, our navigator, declared as Sully came down to investigate our find. "What is that thing?" he muttered, disgusted by the sight and smell. The men mumbled different responses, no one daring to confess that we weren't sure what it was. "Whatever it is, we should toss it back overboard," Hank decided. Steven, the crane operator who was basically Sully's second-in-command, had another idea. "Well, hold on, Captain. Maybe this thing might be worth something. Could be a reward for the authorities," he suggested. Sullivan paused and rubbed the stubble on his chin for a moment as we all stared at the corpse, trying to decide what to do. "Hey, did anybody notice that the storm died down?" Kent asked nervously. "I remember seeing that the sky was actually clear. It was extremely calm. Like suddenly, the sea had just gone quiet." "Oh, it's a bad omen," Dylan muttered. Sully made the sign of the cross. "Whatever it is, we'll take it with us back to Dutch Harbor next week. The Coast Guard can sort it out," he decided. "So, what do we do with it until then?" I remember asking. It felt weird considering that for the most part, our storage was designed for nothing besides rows and rows of sorted crab. "He can't stay in the cage. I bet they'd eat up what little is left of him," Hank remarked as he gestured toward the haul that we had brought up with the corpse. We have a few crates in the hull. Take the thing down there and store it in one. Probably just some poor soul that came out here to try and make a few bucks like us. God rest his soul," Steven decided. Sully agreed with the decision and then ordered all the men back to work except me and Dylan, and we got to be the corpse haulers. "Bring that stretcher over here," I told the greenhorn as I kept staring at the mangled body. Something about it unsettled me more than I cared to admit. And call it a sixth sense if you will, but I knew that the body couldn't possibly be from another fishing boat. It looked older, a lot more so than any of us could imagine. And Dylan mirrored my fears as we moved the body over to the stretcher, and he commented, "This corpse is a lot older than just a few seasons back. Look at the decay. That's like what you would see over in Egypt. It's gotta be at least 100 years old or something. How is it even still down here?" "Maybe the algae and brine made it age faster," I suggested. It was a flimsy excuse, but I didn't want to focus on it any more than I needed to. The longer that we were here with it, the more uneasy I felt. "We just need to go seal this thing up and get back to working," I told him. We made it to the hull and I found one of the crates, motioning Dylan to help me lift the corpse up into it. As we did, the whole ship tipped again and one of the bone fragments scraped against Dylan's leg. Instinctively, he cursed and dropped the corpse, the mangled remains collapsing into the box as I checked his wound. "Best get Hank to check that out once we're in calmer waters," I suggested. We finished sealing up the crate and got back on deck. I remember thinking that it seemed like the sky was more gray than usual, as though the entire ocean was an ominous warning for us about our discovery. But I tried to push the superstitions aside and focus on the work. And Dylan couldn't though. The rest of the day he seemed dizzy and sidetracked. He kept favoring his left side and sometimes wound up accidentally letting a line out when he was supposed to be towing. I knew that he was going to hear an earful from Sully when we stopped for the day. "What's gotten into you, man? I give you one simple job." Sully screamed as Dylan leaned over the edge and started to hurl. Turning the greenhorn around, I couldn't help but to notice a patch of his skin seemed to have blackened and bruised, the same area where he had been damaged by the corpse. "Jesus Christ, you okay, boy?" Sully asked. Dylan's eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed on the deck as the next wave crashed into us. I stood frigid in terror as he shook violently as though having a seizure. I wasn't sure, but it sounded like he was saying something, although it just sounded like gibberish. Still, the entire incident left me even more tense than before. What we had brought up from the waters was evil. Hank and Steven got him below deck to help him recover as I finished up the haul with Sully as he steered us toward a calmer segment of the strait that we were in. He was adamant that we weren't leaving the area despite Dylan's injury, but by nightfall it seemed like he was changing his tune because of how bad it looked. The entire leg might need amputation, Hank said as I checked on them. Dylan's leg was green and flesh was falling off in the area where the bone had scraped him. It made me sick to even look at it, but I did mention to the captain my concern about the corpse. That thing might have parasites or bacteria on it, I said after I explained how Dylan had gotten hurt. It was unnerving to see the greenhorn shake uncontrollably at random times, but perhaps more so when I realized that Hank seemed to have had no clue what could be ailing him. Never seen a sickness like this in the 32 years I've been at sea, he admitted. Nothing spreads that fast. Oh, can you perform a brief autopsy on the corpse? Maybe get a few samples, Sully suggested. All of us were hesitant to get anywhere near the body again, but we knew better than to argue with the captain. I went with Hank to the hull, grabbing a flashlight, and he got a crowbar to open the crate as we approached it. And this is the one, you're sure? Hank asked, checking it. I felt my heart drop. The seal had been broken, the metallic frame of the crate ripped off, and on the inside where the corpse had just been hours ago, I saw scratches and claw marks. They were fresh. Neither of us said anything as I moved the flashlight around the room cautiously. Suddenly, I no longer felt alone. Somewhere in these shadows, I was certain that we were being watched. Go tell the captain and get a gun, I told Hank as we slowly backed away from the crate toward the stairs. To my left, I heard something rattle. A piece of metal gently rolling across the tiles of the deck. My flashlight focused on it, and I saw what looked like little droplets of blood trailing toward the side of the boat. There was a small porthole here, and Hank and I both turned white as ghosts when we saw that the glass was broken, and something had pushed its way out of the window, leaving a mess of tattered flesh and bodily fluids behind. I went to the next porthole over and stuck my head out, looking up the side of the ship. I could just barely see indentations on the metal frame. Something had crawled its way toward the stern of our ship. And then I saw it. A dark silhouette dangling from the side of the frame, just near the crane. Carefully, I pulled my light up to see its lengthy, half-rotting body. It was larger than I had anticipated, as though once it had become reanimated, it had grown twice in size. A splash of waves hit me, causing me to drop the flashlight and cuss, and the creature turned its head toward me, revealing a ghastly, slanted face with elongated, torn ears, misshapen nostrils, and jagged teeth. The last thing that I heard as Hank pulled me back in was a shriek, like it was on the hunt. Hank didn't even need to ask what I had seen. My trembling features told the whole story. And then a long, blackened arm reached through the porthole with a snarl, its large claw-like fingers grabbing at the older man and slamming him toward the wall. I shouted his name as I heard the reanimated corpse scream, and Hank tried desperately to get away, the monster ripping his ear off as he was continuously being pulled through the distorted metal. I grabbed the crowbar that Hank had been holding and I swung at the arm, hitting it repeatedly until at last the creature let go. Snagging him up, Hank covered his ear and tried to push away tears as we ran up the storage stairs to the open deck. I didn't turn back to see if the creature was following us, instead racing across the wet floor to where I saw Kent preparing a line and shouted, "Get inside, now!" The younger man turned to us, his eyes widening as he looked at Hank and then saw something above us. A moment later, the creature had hurled its body across the frame of the boat right on top of Kent, pushing him down and pulling his chest open like it was little more than a stuffed animal. I covered my mouth, watching as Kent begged us to help, backing away toward the mess hall. Hank and I got inside and slammed the door shut. The last thing I saw was the poor man's pleading eyes before the monster ripped them out. Steven was there still monitoring Dylan, looking confused as he saw Hank's injury and then watched me push the table over to the door to jam it shut. "What the hell? What's going on out there?" he asked. Hank sat down next to the stove, using the fire to cauterize his wound as he winced in pain, and I did my best to explain what we had just experienced. "That corpse, it isn't dead. It's like a living monster or something. It just killed Kent," I told him, trying to catch my breath. Steven gave a skeptical look, but then heard the strange, guttural noises from outside and reconsidered. "What in God's green earth is that?" he whispered as he got a look at the creature while it finished off Kent. And behind us, we heard Dylan stir and cough, hardly able to form words as he was trying to talk. I heard a single, ragged word from his parched lips. "Drag we have to kill it with the sea. Sink the ship if we have to," he mumbled as he tried to sit. I got a good look at his sunken features and yellowing eyes, realizing that he was almost entirely infected by the beast now. "It's inside my head, Frank. Like a termite gnawing on a log, it's skittering around in my thoughts, telling me that I need to kill you, tear your flesh apart, and feast on your bones," Dylan said as I realized Steven had wisely already strapped the boy down. How long would those restraints hold was up for debate, I realized as he lurched forward and the entire thing shook. "I will infect you next, all of you. You have to kill me and destroy this ship before it gets back to port. It's the only way," he begged. I looked out the other porthole, realizing that we were in fact moving east again. "The captain made the call days ago, and he's pushing us to Dutch Harbor faster because of this mess," Steven admitted. "Where is the captain now?" Hank asked as he stood up after finishing his stitching on his ear. A little dry blood leaked down his cheek as we all heard the strange monster search for a way to reach us. "Up in the observatory. That thing will go after him next," Steven realized frantically as he moved to push the table out of the way again. "No, we can't leave. Out there we have nowhere to hide," I warned. Steven pushed me away and gave the empty deck a quick glance. "The two of you need to distract it. Topple the cages and make noise over on the starboard side. I'll make my way to the crane. With luck on our side, I can use that thing to knock the monster back to the waves," he decided. I gave Hank a look that told him I thought the plan was idiotic, but honestly, I couldn't think of anything better. All those tips and tricks I had managed to keep in my head for years felt useless against this living nightmare. On the count of 3, Steven instructed, ready to race across the deck. I don't remember those words or what happened next. I focused on my task of belting across to the crab pots. I thought of all the times I had been instructed how to properly prepare them, to make sure that none of the crabs made it out. All of that was now going out the window as I released the first and second latch, and then pushed barrels of raw meat onto the floor, anything to confuse the monster. Across the boat, I saw Steven hurrying up the crane ladder, shouting at us to make more noise as my eyes searched for any sign of the Draugr. It was standing there amid the bait, almost 8 feet tall. It looked healthier now, leaner and more strong than I cared to admit, but every bit as vicious. The boat rocked as it moved toward us, and I tried to think of what to do. "And get to the captain and steer us away from port," Hank ordered me, pushing me toward the observatory stairs, just as the creature made a long jump straight toward him. I didn't dare look back as I went to the captain's chambers. shouting for him to alter course. And then I saw his body split in two against the wheel of the ship, his eyes still open in agony from what the drogger had done to him. A second later, what was left of Hank smashed against the observation glass, his innards sliding down the side of the ship, as I stared down at the seemingly unstoppable beast that stood in the center of the deck. Hank's body fell through the shattered glass, tumbling over the foghorn, which made the creature surprisingly freeze in place as if confused by the noise. I decided to hold on it further, shouting at Steven to finish the job. The loud noise made the drogger an easy target for our crane. My mind flashed back to Lucky Pete as the metallic hook slammed against the creature, flinging it up in the air and overboard. I stood there almost in a hypnotic trance for the longest, overcome with the trauma of all that had transpired. Hours later, we have sent the corpses of Kent, Hank, and Captain Sully to the watery grave. All that remains now is Dylan. We've sequestered him in the mess hall, and Steven and I are unsure if we can even get inside to risk finishing the job, because all we hear are the same strange noises the monster made. And Dylan is likely too far gone to be saved. But I will wait until daylight and then finish the job while Steven focuses on getting us home. He isn't as skilled as the captain navigating these waters, but I can't think of any other solution when we are alone out here. October 15th. I woke to the sound of something hitting the water, and I stepped out on deck to see Steven had just pushed the last of our supplies over the railing. "What is wrong with you? Are you mad?" I asked him, getting a good look at his complexion. He showed no signs of the corruption that had taken Dylan, but still clearly was losing sanity fast. "We don't know if any of this ain't cursed. Look at the sky, Frank. It's a clear day, but still as dark as the witching hour." I did as I was told, disturbed to realize that he was quite right. The sea was so calm that we couldn't even use the currents to push us, and the air was dead. All around the boat, I saw fish slowly dredging up from below. Nothing was able to stay alive as our little boat moved through the waves. "We're cursed. We must kill that thing now if we hope to even have a fighting chance," he insisted. I looked across the cage floor to the mess hall. It had been eerily quiet all night. Had the transformation finished? Was Dylan in some strange hibernation? There would only be one way to find out. I went to the nearby debris from the cages and got a splintered wooden pike, grasping it firmly as I told Steven that I would finish the job. "No matter what you do, move the boat south. If I get turned, I'll end myself before the infection has a chance to spread," I told him. I walked across the crate floor and flung the mess hall door open, half expecting Dylan to lunge at me when I did. To my surprise, he was instead sitting stiff on the cot across the way, his legs still shackled, but looking nothing like the boy that I had met days ago. His skin was now entirely a cool blackish blue, as though he had been bruised from head to toe, and sharp black veins ran from his neck to his creases around his blackish yellow eyes. His hair was a pale and crackly brown, and his teeth were like sharks, needling outward as he looked at me with a curious ferocity. He was at least twice as large too, the clothes hardly fitting, and leaving behind a bulging, bulk nightmare of a brute. I wasn't sure the shackling would even hold him long enough for me to get across the room and stake his heart.
"I can smell your fear,"
the boy spoke. His voice was raspy and his breath rancid. "It'll all be over soon. I can free you," I told him as I took a tentative step forward.
"Strange. I was about to give you the same offer."
"Let me end your suffering, Dylan. I owe you that much."
Oh, the boy you knew is gone. I am a new form, not of the living nor the dead. I walk a path meant for gods, one where suffering is not a curse but a blessing.
He hissed. He stood up, the metallic clasp on his leg buckling easily.
I could crush you like a twig where you stand, tear your flesh from starboard to port in a matter of minutes, and make sure you felt every single moment of it.
Dylan rasped. My heart beat faster as he proved his point by crossing the room in a mere second, towering over me now.
Do you know why you still live?
The Draugr asked. In response, I raised the stake up and slammed it against his chest, desperate to drive it in. It didn't even make the behemoth flinch. Instead, he pulled me up like a rag doll and took the stake out, pinning me to the side of the door with it, where I hung like a sinner from the crucifix.
Let me show you the wonders that I'm capable of.
Dylan told me as he stepped out toward the deck, his eyes focusing on the observatory. He raised his hands up just as I saw Stephen realize what was happening, and then the towering vampire transformed into a swarm of deadly flaming bats. Their endless shrieking swirled about toward Stephen, smashing into the glass like bullets and slicing at his flesh aimlessly. I heard him scream and beg for help, but there was no one left. It didn't stop for hours. I hung there against the hull of the Silver Beauty for a day, starving and waiting for Dylan to return and finish me off. He never did. Instead, the ship hit against rocks and I found myself at the mercy of rescue workers after 3 days, looking like a mad sailor who had lost their entire crew to the merciless ocean. When they let me down, they asked me if there were any other survivors, and I thought of Dylan. I had no idea where the Draugr had disappeared to, nor why he had allowed me to live, but I told them that I knew of no one. The official report I gave claimed that a severe storm had occurred and killed the others. I had grown ill and placed myself at the mercy of the waters, hoping to join them in the depths. I was told that I would be given mandatory therapy for 2 months, and small compensation for the voyage. Not anything close to what I had been promised, but honestly, I was thankful to just be alive. I called Lori from a hotel that night, blubbering like an idiot and apologizing. Why do you keep saying that you're sorry? This isn't your fault, she kept saying. But I knew that it was different. And that beast now roamed free because of the incident on that boat. I had not acted quickly enough to kill the boy. Now all of them were dead because of me. October 17th. I received a letter telling me that a small service for the crew of the Silver Beauty would be held near the port of call where we had first left, and I left first thing at early light to pay my respects. The harbor was quite empty, save for the office where I was told to wait. Inside, I saw that there were 6 coffins prepared, 1 for each of the crew. Wait, 6? I froze in place as one of the coffin lids opened and Dylan sat up and turned toward me. The others slowly did the same, revealing the undead crew members, some of whom looked like they were hardly a mangle of flesh and bones left. All of them under the thrall of their new master, who gestured toward the empty coffin on his left.
The sea waits for us, my child. We must return and tread across the dark waters to be found once more,
Dylan told me. My fingers touched the rim of the coffin as tears streamed down my face. Please, I have a wife and a child on the way, I begged.
Who else do you think I would call to cast us off?
The Draugr responded. I heard the door to the viewing room close and my heart shuddered as I saw Lori standing there drenched in fresh blood. A hole was ruptured where our unborn had once been, and I realized that the monster had targeted her first to regain full strength, to ensure my cooperation as a dark servant. Lori crossed the threshold and offered me a knife to finish the task, and I wordlessly took it, using it on my wrists as I climbed into the coffin. "Do not fear, my love. This is only the beginning," she swore, her dead eyes smiling down at me. I shuddered and cried, fighting against the dark as the coffins closed shut. What came next was only the inescapable horrors of death. October 21st. A ship found my body 23 miles from Dutch Harbor. I am still shaking from the cold. They have questions about why I might attempt a funeral at sea for myself. I have promised that I will answer all of them once they gather the crew together. They are weary of trusting a man that they dredged up from the ocean, but I will show them the new path that has led me here. I will lead them to the dark depths that my master has prepared for us below. As the end of November loomed, Nick and I were trying to figure out where to go next. Allie and her kind had turned to something that we could barely comprehend. It was hard to wrap our heads around, but we had agreed. We would deal with this one last thing, and then we were heading to Dallas. Nick had this idea to trace her steps. Allie was a predator, more a creature than person. She had hunted something down and feasted on them, as Nick so eloquently put. There's gotta be a bunch of bones laying around. Not in a physical sense, but a metaphorical one, meaning that there had to be traces. While we had chased after her, she had been busy hunting prey and feasting on them. And at some point, something clicked, turning her into whatever she had become. A strange sort of quasi-human unraveling at the seams. You could tell just by her face. It wasn't all that hard to get a few crumbs to follow. Charlie on dispatch told us that there had been reports of highway assaults, and there were a few more missing people being reported than usual. That had to mean something. Sifting through a handful of cases, one stood out. It was an older one, but it caught my attention. There was a case talking about an obsessive woman named Marielle, who had been missing for a long time. Apparently, there had recently been a ping on that case. Somebody had recognized her at a supermarket down in Mankato. I had felt the pull of Allie a couple of times going south. This Marielle had a couple of strange mentions in her file. For example, how she was obsessed with a particular phrase and a word. Blameless. While it was impossible to confirm, my working theory was that Allie had gotten to her and consumed her. This somehow created an amalgamation of the two, perhaps giving Allie the clarity of mind she needed to overcome her feral state. It would explain a couple of things. And then there was that book, The Diary of Emmett Rask. That seemed important. For all that I could find about this, and nothing was substantial. Rask was prolific but strange. He wrote poems, children's books, a couple of short stories, but his diary, that was seemingly an urban legend. The working theory was that Rask and his identity theory touched on the idea that you can ascribe a person's essence into words that, when read, could be translated and transcribed onto the very being of another. Perhaps somewhere in that picture of his life, there was a vast bank of knowledge about worlds that never were, or places that couldn't be. And maybe he knew more than he let on. There was no way to tell, but that would explain why Allie got a hold of it. That was another bone buried somewhere. If she had it, that meant that someone else didn't have it. If Allie could wrest something like that away from someone, she would have made a very powerful enemy. Maybe an enemy powerful enough for us to make use of them. That could work. We didn't know a lot of people who might have any kind of insight into this type of thing, but there was always Evan. Problem was, Evan hadn't been around for some time, and he was a pain in the ass to track down. He always seemed to appear when he had to somehow, but you can't wish upon a star and hope for the best. And Nick and I drove out to Evan's place in early December. The place looked abandoned, but what else could we do? There was no car there, no obvious signs of movement. Nick was enjoying a gas station hot dog as I stood outside the house, calling out at the top of my lungs. Returning to the car, I leaned against the hood with a shrug. "Got any other ideas?" Nick asked. We gotta make more noise," I said. "I don't know how good his hearing is." "Who says that he has hearing?" Nick scoffed. "Maybe it's like 1,000 little tongues vibrating on the back of his neck or something." "I'm gonna ignore that." Nick shrugged and picked up his hunting rifle, firing a shot into the air. It rung out across the forest, scaring off a flock of birds. That ought to get his attention. As predicted, it didn't take that long for Evan to show up. Not from the house, though. There was just a sudden shade looming over us, and then he was standing behind our car. And good thing he wasn't there to rip our throats out, or he would have had a field day. It was easy to forget how unpredictable a creature like Evan can be. The large figure was still covered in his makeshift poncho pile of blankets and debris, reminding me of a trash island. He said nothing as we turned to him. "We got a problem," I said, "and we need your help." He tilted his head to show that he was listening. Nick and I took turns explaining the situation with Allie, her efforts to break something fundamental into her acquiring of this unusual diary. I tried to explain how bad it was about to get. "This could hurt a lot of people," I said. "Maybe all of us."
Yes,
Evan agreed. "Maybe you could help us then," I said. "Take her down." He shook his head.
"No," he said. "I've got a friend in need."
"And that's so important that you're ready to risk all of this," Nick chimed in, knowing how bad it can get. Evan nodded. Apparently something was just more important to him. We didn't leave empty-handed, though. Evan had an idea of who might have had a copy of the diary of Emmett Trask, but he wasn't sure about sharing that information. He was afraid that we might do something rash and unpredictable, if not properly supervised. While I couldn't guarantee anything, I promised that we would do our best to keep it civilized. And with that, he handed us a business card. A simple plain black laminated card with white text on it. Geppetto, just to show that it was from him. He drew a symbol on the back with a silvery marker pen. And with that, we had a new target. Geppetto was an entrance code to an underground club up in Minneapolis. According to Evan, the owner had an unusual contact that in turn owned a copy of the book. It was all a bit wishy-washy, but at least we had an address. It was a lead, if anything. The following weekend, Nick and I drove up there. We discussed club wear all the way up there, and how neither of us had just kicked back for the past year. And then again, we weren't really club people. Not that we were too old, you just get a feel for these things over the years, especially as a cop. By Saturday evening, Nick and I were standing outside a club called Puppets. It was on a busy off-street with a crowd that was either too drunk to keep going or too sober to think a place like that was a good idea. Meaning the only people inside were regulars or misguided tourists. Add to that, the place was a creep show. They had these weird white plastic dolls in one of the windows. Nick leaned over to whisper as he saw them. "I'm not sure why," he said, "but I hate those things." Showing the black card to the bouncer, we were ushered inside. "Hey, don't we need a stamp or something?" Nick asked. "Inside," the bouncer huffed. Stepping inside, my jaw dropped. Close to 50 people, all dancing to this intense rave music, all wearing white masks. We had seen those masks before. I had seen them too close for comfort. There was no way in hell I was wearing one. An attendant approached us and I just waved the Geppetto card at her, declining the mask. Nick did the same, but let me carry the conversation. She took a long look at the card and the symbol that Evan had drawn. She looked up at us, her eyes darting back and forth. "The boss," she said. "You looking for the boss?" "An acquaintance of his," I said. "Someone, a bit odd, has a collection." "Nah, you gotta be more specific, doll." I thought back in that time when I had been forced to wear one of those masks. It had been at the start of my time in Tomskog, and there had been masks everywhere. There was one guy in particular that stood out in my mind. I could barely remember him, but there were details fluttering in the back of my mind. "I think he's got a gray hoodie," I said. "Expressive mask. Thick hair." "Oh, Mr. Handsome, you're here to see him." Nick and I looked at one another. I shrugged at her. "I suppose we are." We were guided past the dance floor and into the kitchen. The attendant kept talking to us over her shoulder. "Any friend of Mr. Handsome is a friend of ours," she continued. "He does so much for the society, you know." "And what society is that?" Nick asked. "Oh, you tease," the attendant smiles. "Break a neck and then come ask me that again." "Isn't it break a leg?" I asked. "That works too sometimes." We were led down a spiraling staircase and into the underground maintenance area. There were corridors marked with letters ranging from A to H. By the G's, someone had added a pedo with a white marker. The attendant pointed us down the hall. "You go on ahead, I'll wait upstairs." We approached the door at the end of the hall, looking up at a single red light. I knocked on the door while Nick took a step back to keep watch. Old habits die hard. Officers work in pairs to watch each other's backs. Something thumped against the door. It was hard to tell with the bass humming through the floor. I decided to enter. There was an empty takeout box on the floor, apparently thrown at us. The room was fairly small and covered in a red light. It reminded me of a dark room. In the middle of it sat a person in a gray hoodie with a white mask, just like the people upstairs. I had seen it before. As he turned to us, I was reminded that it wasn't a mask. He just had a strange and twisted face in porcelain white. It moved as his mood shifted. He reached out his arm, but it didn't stop. It went about a foot longer than it should, past me and Nick, closing the door behind us. He got up from his chair and somehow grew taller. It's as if the shape of his body could adjust and differ depending on what he wanted to do. It was eerie to see, and given our previous interaction, I wasn't sure we hadn't been led into a trap. There was a long pause as we watched one another. Nick had his hand inside his jacket, where I knew that he had a hidden handgun. The walls were covered in tools, materials, and electronics. One corner was full of boxes stacked to the ceiling. A couple of masks hung from strings tied around pipes lining the edge of the room. They slowly rotated, pushed by invisible winds, like a silent, restless crowd. I put on my cop persona and straightened my back. "Good evening," I said. "Did you recently lose a copy of a book named Diary of Emmett Rask?" His neck grew about the length of an arm as he pulled back from us, bobbing back and forth like an owl trying to focus on its prey. He nodded twice in rapid succession. We're tracking down the thief and dealing with her, I said, but we could use some help. I'm not sure if you're the right person to help us. There was a long, sound coming from him. Nick looked at me as if trying to tell me to keep going. We're having trouble finding her, I said. We sort of lost that tool. We also don't know how to deal with her. She's dangerous. The strange man nodded, still making that same sound. He walked over to the masks hanging from the pipes and plucked one from a string like a ripe fruit. Sitting back down, I saw the lower end of his jaw unhinge and loosen with a strap, as a long blue tongue extended from his face. Using it like a paintbrush, he started making changes to the mask, pushing up a cheekbone, adjusting the corner of a lip, a touch of blue, a touch of red. Massaging the mask with his hands, he shaped it like clay. It was made darker, longer. There was a tint of blue running from the eyes like someone crying, yet the expression was neutral. Finally, he pushed his thumbs in at the top, making two protruding nubs like budding horns. He turned to Nick, holding it out like a gift. He had this eerie smile on his face, nodding enthusiastically. He didn't say a thing. He just huffed as if trying to laugh. Nick took it, giving a closer look. Before I got a chance to say or do anything, the mask maker grabbed my hands. Nick stepped to the side, drawing his pistol. These two long hands with fingers that wouldn't stop moving or changing size grasped all the way up my wrists. It wasn't forceful but unpleasant. It didn't even look at Nick, instead focusing every heartbeat of attention on me. I felt like I was being stared at by the sun. It was overwhelming. He put something in my hands and moved my fingers. It just took a couple of seconds, and then he stepped back and allowed me to see what he had done. He placed a card in my hand and I had my hand right, I owe you, and then he held out his hand, as if asking me to give it back to him. I just stood there for a moment before it clicked. You're saying I owe you, I said. That's what you're trying to say. He nodded. I handed the paper back to him. Fair, I nodded, as long as this helps. We left that place without turning our backs to him. He went right back to working on another mask. The moment that the door closed, I could hear whistling. Nick put his gun down, panting heavily. I was this close, he whispered. This close. You think that'll help? I asked, nodding at the mask he had been given. For anything but next Halloween, I mean. Nah, he shrugged. I'm going as Charlie Brown. Nick, I'm serious. Look, these freaks got their screws so loose we don't even know what toolbox they're in anymore. But we keep coming back to them, and that's gotta count for something. I looked down at the mask. A simple neutral face in a coal black, with blue tears streaming down. It was uncanny, so realistic I thought that it would blink at me. Sure, I agreed with a sigh. Counts for something. I drove back while Nick fiddled with the mask. He looked it over, treating it a bit like a magic mirror. The rhythmic flow of the streetlights gleamed off the mask again and again, reflecting what little light it could in the strange molded plastic. Should I put it on? He asked. Are we supposed to? I asked back. What else are we gonna do? He scoffed. It's a mask. Maybe I'm supposed to do it, I said. But he gave it to me, right? He sighed. I'm going for it. I didn't have time to protest. He put it on, adjusting a strap on the back of his head. It fit him perfectly. Nick leaned back in his seat. It doesn't feel like anything. It's just a mask. Try saying something or thinking something, I said. You don't think that I'm thinking something? Well, generally no, Nick. He shook his head at me and then closed his eyes. I glanced over at him a couple of times. He was making little movements with his head and fingers, like a dog having a quiet dream. It looked strange, involuntary, and then for a second he clutched his chest, inhaling forcefully. I threw myself on the brakes to pull over and check on him, but Nick just waved me off. He pulled the mask away, shaking his head. No, I'm fine, he hesitated. It's fine, it was just a lot at once. I didn't care. I pulled over and put the car in park, looking at him. I thought about what we need, he said, and it showed me something. What? I think it's a way to get to her, he said. And you're not. I mean, this is weird. We made it all the way back to Nick's. By the time that we arrived, we were exhausted. I collapsed on his couch, wrapping myself in a blanket as his TV ran in the background. Nick slumped down next to me, still holding his mask. He looked weird without his pink sunglasses. He told me about his experience with the mask. He said it felt like he had been in a dark room, talking to a stranger on the other side of a wall. They had told him about something that he needed to find, and a cryptic message. That Allie wasn't out to kill. She was waiting for an eye to blink, a blind spot in which to act. I don't get that part, he said. What eye? What blink? The Yearwalker, I said. Maybe this proverbial eye blinks the moment that it grants a wish. Maybe that is what she's waiting for. So, New Year's Eve, Nick said. That's our target. We banking on this. Hey, I don't know, you're the one making out with a scary charcoal oracle face. I am, huh? He turned the mask over, holding it up to his face. He wanted to put it back on, but he didn't. Instead, he let out a long sigh, closing his eyes. I think you're right, he continued. I don't know why, but I think you are. Oh, I usually am, I smiled. Maybe that's why. Maybe. It was strange. No quips, no callbacks. That, more than the mask, concerned me. For the next few days, we went on a wild goose chase. There were items that we needed to get. Some of them were simple, like a large white sheet and a couple of metal rods. Others were a bit more difficult. We had to drive to a nearby town to get an old movie projector, for example. And then there was Digman's ranch. John Digman's place had burned down, but we went there to poke through the ashes. It didn't take long for Nick, adorned with the strange mask, to find out what we were looking for. A green metal lockbox in the back of a collapsed building. Looking a bit closer, there was a time-worn plastic title glued to the side. The End of Eternity. By that time, Christmas was just around the corner. Nick and I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, but it was nice seeing the town do something so normal for once. All the shops had little sales and there were decorations in every driveway. Lanterns, candles, and a couple of menorahs adorning the windows. The occasional decorative blue sunflower, some with little Santa hats. All in all, Tomskog was still a town full of people, and people still loved Christmas. Nick got me a laptop. He was tired of me using his computer, I suppose. Funny, that's the laptop that I'm writing on right now. I got him a couple of round sunglasses, but black, not pink. They looked way cooler. I couldn't tell if he liked them or not, but he wore them a lot on his own accord. As the days grew closer to New Year's Eve, Nick had it all set up in his house. A screen, the movie projector, and the strange film. I asked him to double-check the film roll, but he insisted that it was a bad idea. We were gonna play it on New Year's and never again. He treated that thing like it was something dangerous, and I wasn't inclined to doubt him. Then it was time. As New Year's approached, the town transformed again. Fireworks were going off at all hours of the day. People were out celebrating and singing in the middle of the day. But I was inside with Nick, clutching my hunting rifle. We were finding Allie and taking her out. and yet I had doubts. As we sat on his couch watching the empty projector screen, I asked him, "You sure this is gonna work?" "Yeah," Nick said. "They said it would. It's really gonna be that easy. Stepping through, boom, and then done." "Oh, I think there's more to it than that, but we got this." "You mind if I take a peek?" I asked. "I want to know what you know." Nick threw the mask at me with a shrug. "It ain't saying shit," he explained. "It's my mask and it doesn't want to speak to anyone else." I tried it on, but nothing happened. He was right. The mask must have been bound to him the moment that he put it on. It had even started to look like him a bit. The nose was different, the hairline too. I gave it back to him. As the clock crept closer to midnight, I was freaking out. He switched up his clothes from a white sports t-shirt to a black shirt. He said that it was camouflage, but I think he just wanted to look nice for New Year's. That final hour before the ring of the bell felt like an eternity. Nick insisted that we wait. He would flip the projector on and I was to follow him without looking. That was important, not to look. Something about the film was dangerous to see. According to Nick's mask, the film was a sort of gateway to something horrifying, but if you didn't look, you might be okay. But that was the key word here. Might. There were no guarantees. Not anymore. As we closed in on 5 minutes, Nick put away the mask and grabbed his rifle. "Close your eyes," he said. I did. And then the film rolled to life, one click at a time. I could feel the heat of the projector. I could see the changing color through my closed eyelids. Something was showing, but I wasn't supposed to look. Nick took my hand. He was nervous. He took a few deep breaths. "We good?" I asked. "Yeah," he sighed. "We good." We stepped forward. For a moment, I thought that we were walking straight into his living room wall, but after a couple of steps, it seemed that the room had grown larger, much larger. It didn't stop. "Just a little more," Nick whispered. "Keep her in your mind." I imagined Allie the way that I had first seen her at the Hatchet compound. This woman was an educated genius. You didn't get that kind of position at a place like Hatchet without being exceptional. That she had ended up here was, at the end of the day, just a strange happenstance. A long, winding road of bad choices. Maybe this was just another one of those choices. And Nick let go of my hand. "You can look now." And I did. There were no more fireworks, no celebrations, just an alien sky, a ruined landscape, and a distant tree reaching for the moon. The ground was covered in this fine powdered blue and black ash. It had a similar color to Nick's mask. I was glad that he left it behind. That thing creeped me out. "Hold up," Nick said. "I gotta test something." He held up his rifle, firing a round into the air, pushing the casing out to turn to ash, same as the ground. Nick checked the chamber, showing me. The bullet was still there. "The mask said that time works differently when the eye blinks," he said. "She's vulnerable now, huh?" Something like that. We headed towards the tree. It felt like walking through the ruins of Tomskog. I could see the outline where certain buildings had stood, but it was hard to navigate. Was that the corner pub or the supermarket? It's impossible to tell. I found an old piece of sheet metal. It had been pressed into a pattern, but it looked burned. It had a logo on the side. Hammerhead Pharmaceuticals. It even had the blue sunflower logo. I showed it to Nick. Not quite Hatchet," he said, "but similar. It's weird, right?" "Yeah, but what do you expect?" "Hammerhead. Similar but not the same. Well, except for the logo." Time really does move differently in the places beyond. In a second, you can be a mile away. In a minute, you've just moved a couple of feet. It's a space bound by fragmented and infrequent rules, remnants of something that used to govern. By the time we made it to the tree, I couldn't tell if it had been days, weeks, or seconds. The base of the tree was so massive that it stretched to the horizon and back either way that we watched. It was impossibly large, like a vertical ocean, but it wasn't the size of the thing that bothered me. This wasn't a tree. It was organic. Muscle, bone, sinew. Some large, some small, some downright alien. Every rippling heartbeat moved like flash floods, straining under the flimsy shell. It was alive and well, a cancerous growth protruding from the ashen earth. There was a large building up ahead. It looked like an old hospital, the edge of which had been swallowed by the tree. The full moon felt like a midnight sun, sending a warmth across my arms. Looking down, our shadows had grown longer. It looked like they were trying to pull us back, begging us not to go any further. The building loomed ahead, accentuated by blue sunflowers. We stopped just before the main entrance, looking up at a sun-bleached sign. I saw the Hammerhead logo, but not much else. Nick checked his rifle again and then nodded at me. "And this is it," he said. "How do you know?" "Trust me," he said. "This is it." We made our way through the dark corridor. It's surprising how dark it can get when all the electronics are gone. There were no windows and only a vague reflection from the light outside. It was quiet, peaceful. There was a swaying sound coming from outside like shifting winds. It took me a while to realize that it was the pulse of the tree, a force of nature if anything. I found a staircase and we hurried upwards, rifles at the ready, my breath catching up to my throat. I had a bad feeling and I didn't know if it was coming from my worries, my body, or something in between. We weren't supposed to be there, in so many ways, but this had to end. We were going to Dallas. By the time we got to the top, it was pitch black. I could feel a door handle. Nick was catching his breath too, so I just stopped for a second. I didn't want to go out there. If anything, I felt like turning back and crashing on Nick's couch. We could be in Dallas by the morning. We didn't have to risk it. My mouth blurted out the first thing that it could think of. "Did you really like the sunglasses?" I asked. "Yeah, really?" "Yeah," he insisted. "It was never about the color or the shape. It's the intention, you know." "Intention?" I asked. "What intention?" "You wanted me to look cool." I snorted. It was dumb but cute. That sort of summed him up in a way. He tapped the door to alert me. It was go time. We pushed and the doors swung wide open. It was an old helicopter pad, or what remained of it. The H had been reduced to an I. I could see old emergency relief boxes stacked empty in the corner. Bullet holes lined the sides of the roof. Someone outside had been shooting up, and someone up here had been shooting down. There were empty bullet casings on the ground, sun faded on one side. There were tracks in the dust. Someone had been there recently. I looked up, seeing the towering mass ahead of us. She had to be here. Allie couldn't get away again. It didn't take long to spot her. She had grown since the last time that I saw her, at least twice the size, with only remnants of her white robes clinging to her. She was barely holding a consistent shape, much like the tree itself. Instead of a changing face, her entire body was morphing in and out of whatever tool, pose, and movement that she needed. She was climbing the tree, heading to the top, to reach for the moon with the rest of the world. Instead of stretching out an arm, a cyst would burst to reveal a new arm, leaving the old arm to wither and die. A hooked hand would reach, pull her upward, and something else would take its place. a localized storm of flesh and mass making its way upward like an infection reaching for a vein. We had been right on time. She had only just started. Nick crouched down, steadied his rifle, and took the first shot. I followed his lead. It was like popping balloons. Sudden little screams compounded into a mass of voices calling out in senseless hate. Nick kept firing. We got a couple of shots off and he was right. Time didn't work as it should. The bullets never left our chambers, but they still hurt her. I was on my 12th shot when I hit her shoulder, sending her reeling to the ground. Allie crashed into the concrete, breaking apart and reforming with a painful moan. "Not now," she called out. "Not now." I glanced over at Nick and he met my eyes. He was terrified. His lips trembled. "Don't stop," he wheezed. "Not for anything." We didn't move an inch closer. We kept our distance and we fired over and over and over. She kept screaming, screeching like a wind in pain, a tortured choir. "How can you be this moronic?" she cried. "Are you this hungry to die?" Nick shook his head and kept firing. I did too. An arm punctured, a jaw cracked. A shoulder blade splintered. We had to keep going. We had to. She had trouble moving, instead trying to spasm her way across the roof. She was going for us, but she couldn't. We were always ahead, running circles around her and never stopping the ceaseless bullet rain. Her blood sunk into the eroded cracks of the concrete, spilling across the roof in a crackling pattern. She turned to me, her reformed eyes trying to roll back into their sockets. When she looked at me, though, something changed. I saw me and Nick on top of a burning mountain, firing at a sizzling mass of lava, stabbing her with spears as she rolled around in a lake, sticking her with bayonets in a bombed-out apocalypse-scape. The fight wasn't going to end here. It wasn't ever going to end. She was immortal, unending, inevitable. I stopped firing and I looked into those eyes and I saw that it would never end. We were begging her to make us Sisyphus, pushing the same boulder up the hill forever. She would not stop, she couldn't, and she thought herself blameless in this. And then I got slapped with cold metal right across the jaw. Nick didn't hold back, it hurt like hell. "Don't stop." "It's pointless," I yelled back. "Look, she can't stop." "So?" He turned back to her, firing another shot, another and another. A finger flying off the side of the roof, a scalp popping open like an inverted pocket, a hand hanging on by a thread. I felt this darkness sinking into my chest, begging me to just give up. But Nick's voice was louder. I saw it clearer and clearer. In another place, we were sailors chasing a whale. We were the Mayan twins killing the bird demon, Heracles killing the Nemean lion, Perseus killing Medusa, King George and the dragon, Theseus and the Minotaur, Arjuna wielding the Rudra Astra, slaying countless unyielding demons. In those places and times, we burned her with fire, acid, and toxin. We pierced her with spears and swords and axes and knives. We used every conceivable weapon, every tactic, every clever trap and trick. But she just did not die. She always found her way back and we would have to do it all again. And yet there I was, I still pulled the trigger. An endless, pointless cycle of violence, desperation, and opposition. She would not die and we would not let her live. Immovable objects and unstoppable forces. For every piece broken, another would take its place. And then Nick stopped firing. I blinked. Looking up, his rifle hung loose at his side. He was smiling like an idiot. He looked at me and then pointed at Allie. She was more of a bullet hole than a creature. She had stopped moving. Not a twitch, not a huff, still as the grave. Nick wiped some blood spatters from his forehead. I hadn't even thought about how long we had stood there. What had happened? I asked. I goddamn knew it, he grinned. I knew she was a liar. The mask said that she was a liar, and I felt it. A liar, I said. That's it. That's all this is. You've met hundreds of people who are nothing but liars, Nick sighed. How is this any different from someone desperate to get out of a citation? Oh, the arms for one, I said, pointing at the dead body. And the head, kind of. Funny, Nick nodded. Real funny. He sat down and I followed his lead. Allie didn't even have enough blood left to bleed by now. You think we gotta pay the mask guy? Nick asked. You gave him an IOU. We better, I said. I'm kinda done with this. With what? This, I said, nodding to Allie. Done. And Nick nodded, adjusting his black sunglasses. He couldn't help but smile as he did. We just sat there for a moment, looking at half the moon peeking out behind the vast bio tree. The only wind I would feel would come from air being pushed as waves of flesh rolled with an unseen beating heart. I got a good feeling about this, Nick said. I really do. About what? This, he said, gesturing to Allie. I think we've done something here. Something real. Oh, maybe, I said. Right now, I just want to shower. Let's wait a day before Dallas and get some takeout. I had almost forgotten it. It felt so distant, it felt too real in a way. There was this life here with Nick, and then there was that other life with taxes, loans, elections, and rear-wheel drive. Could I really live like that? Could I willingly choose to be safe and warm when I had seen how close we were to the edge? I wasn't sure, but Nick seemed to be. There was a little ticking noise, metallic. I couldn't tell where it came from. I checked the chamber and my rifle, and the bullet was still there. Looking over at Allie, I could see bullet fragments rolling out of her wounds. Tick, tick. I looked at Nick. He was still looking up at the moon. I didn't have enough time to warn him. Something shot out of Allie like a scorpion sting, a second spine coming out of the remains of her jaw. Just a small puncture wound. Right to Nick's heart. I couldn't think, I couldn't scream. I raged for a minute, a second, a day. My heart was skipping beats like a broken record, bursting my thoughts into a desperate static. I threw myself at Allie. The eroded roof collapsed, sending us tumbling into the dark. It would never end. I would be Cain to her Abel, slaying her in the field. I would be Thor, killing and being killed by the great Jormungand, the world serpent. But no matter my role, no matter the place, and no matter the how, the when, the why, we would always destroy one another. And when it happened, it would just continue somewhere else. But she would be back. She would try again. And if I stopped, she would win. For a moment, she wasn't moving. I stepped out of a crater of broken bones and flesh. Allie was already putting herself back together again. This broken place where time was never ending, allowing her to try again and again and again, just like the bullet in my chamber. Something was looking the other way, and down this night and in this moment, the rules didn't apply. I grabbed a cinder block and beat her to a pulp over and over and over. I was screaming at her, begging her to die, not with words but with actions. I didn't even notice that I was bawling like a child. This was it. Me in that pit, that would be it. I couldn't let her win, but she couldn't lose. I've never felt so desperate. That insight into what your reality was turning into, what you had lost along the way, what you could have had if you just kept your mouth shut and looked ahead. I could have just gone to Dallas. I had had so many chances. I had been such a senseless idiot, just like Allie had said. I had destroyed everything, and now I was gonna have to keep destroying over and over. There would be no end. I couldn't fathom that thought. I couldn't live with it. It felt like my heart was turning an icy blue, begging me to lie to myself. I sat there beating a dead body with a rock, screaming, like the last wolf howling at the moon for no one to hear. And then a tap on the shoulder. I turned around. Nick? He had made his way down the stairs. There was a puncture wound straight through his chest, all the way through his heart. It wasn't big, but the bleeding was intense. Of course, she couldn't die here, so neither could we. The mask had called her a liar. She hadn't lied about being immortal. She had lied about there being nothing that we could do. Nick looked me over, checking me for wounds. It was harder than it looked. I was more blood than human. I was largely alright though. It's okay, he said under his breath. We're good. We're not good, Nick. We're okay. It's good. Nick, come on, you're... Not now. He put his hands on my shoulders and then pulled me in for a hug. I slobbered all over his shoulder, ruining the only part of his shirt that wasn't blood and sweat. I could feel the cold metal on his black sunglasses. I held him tight. It's okay, he said again. It's okay, we got this. We can't stay here forever, I cried. We can't stay here, we can't be like this. We can fix this, he said, stroking my head. We made it this far. So this is it. This is the end of the line, just killing this thing over and over. And Nick chuckled, holding back a sob. So? But there was that one thing that neither Nick or I had counted on. Maybe it was a snag in the machine, a deteriorated frame snapping apart, who knows? But as the movie projector in his living room caught fire, something had happened. It felt like falling. I was pulled away, but Nick wasn't. Flashes of white, gold, and black. Bursts of static playing with my mind. The last I saw of Nick was him checking the chamber, holding up a hand in a casual goodbye. He still had his black sunglasses on. In a moment, I was standing in the middle of his living room in front of a blank projector screen. I was dripping blood across his carpet. The projector had tipped over as one of the legs gave out, spreading out what remained of the cursed film as soot on the wooden floor. It was just a minute past midnight, and the celebrations were going strong outside. But all I could hear was my beating heart and the tip-tap of dripping blood. The black mask that Nick had been given had split in two. The face now resembled me. The tears looked the same. Nick was still out there. He would always be there. Long after I'm gone, he'd still be there. That icy thought gripped my gut and twisted. I cried myself to sleep on the floor that night, never even getting to the shower. It hurts to recount what happened next. The weeks of dead-end leads. The duck left Tomskog after the year walk came to an end. The missing posters of Nick across the town popped up and disappeared as time passed. Still though, he had left that place with a hole in his heart. He would have died. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise. I never stopped trying to find a way back, but there was nothing left to do. All trails had turned to ash and all hope had followed. Evan was nowhere to be found. Not even the yearwalker was around. All that remained for me was a strange town where I wasn't wanted. So what could I do? I left. And for a while, that's been my story. That is, until not too long ago. I was talking to Charlie. Yeah, we still keep in touch every now and then. She doesn't get out much. Turns out there had been sightings of Perry Digman, the year walker in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I drove up there as soon as I could. I met Perry as he left his shift at a restaurant. I don't think he recognized me, but I sure as hell recognized him. You don't easily forget the faces of people that you've saved, not even if they're surprised and under a struggling streetlight. We had a short conversation, and we came to an agreement. a realization. He's going to do the year walk again to get his Uncle John back. And now I'm doing one too. Hold on, Nick. We're still getting to Dallas. We good. One time near Prescott, Arizona, I witnessed a ghostly wagon train rumble across the scrub brush for nearly an hour. It kept pace with my truck as I screamed down the highway. The driver even doffed his cap to me. I returned the favor as he evaporated into a fine mist. Another time when I was hauling a load just south of Duluth, my truck nearly slammed into a Wendigo that crossed directly in front of me. The sucker was tall, near 12 feet, and made from bones that just didn't fit together right. Icy blue eyes and a deer skull looking through me, into my soul. Nearly gave me a heart attack. Or once during a full moon while I was on Highway 21 outside Lowman, Idaho. I stopped to take a piss roadside when something started moving in the tall grass. Hand to God, 6 people no taller than a foot dressed in blood-streaked deerskins walked out and fired about a dozen arrows at me in my truck. I yanked my pants up, pissed all over myself, but made it back into my truck before an arrow found me. Later, an old Shoshone man in a nearby hotel told me that I had probably seen the Namaragar, called them the People Eaters, and boy howdy was I glad I'd cut my piss short to escape them. Point is, when you crisscross the country as often as I do, bearing witness to the bizarre becomes second nature. It can't be helped. Sometimes the universe's oddities finds your eyeballs and you have to adjust your understanding of the natural world a tick or two. The lessons you learned in school amount to a hill of beans after you've seen a skinwalker run along your truck for 2 miles or watched a UFO buzz a cornfield. Each time you witness something that colors outside the lines, our collective lack of knowledge about the natural world smacks you red in the face. But our knowledge about the supernatural world, paltry, non-existence. At best, we have guesses. At worst, superstitions. Hell, we know more about the mountains on Mars than we do about Bigfoot and his ilk. For all we know, Bigfoot is a Martian. I'll never understand why these things happen, but talk to any road dog and they'll tell you the same stories. It's part and parcel to the gig. You pull freight for any extended period of time and you're bound to have the weird find your world. Normally, I'd be able to compartmentalize these events. Those thoughts get stashed away in my mind's attic to be contemplated at another time. I'll trot them out a few times a year, usually when I'm bullshitting with other truckers or trying to tell a compelling story at a party. I may not understand the goings-on, but I know how to use them. The truth is, if I let those ideas into the wider framework of my brain, it'd be damn near impossible to do anything else but dwell on them. I'm a curious cat, always have been. I go down more rabbit holes than Bugs Bunny. How I keep my wits about me on the road. Here's something interesting about ants and aphids. Suddenly, I'm listening to 10 books about natural symbiosis, just how my brain works. But I can't do that with the supernatural. Not now, anyway. Maybe when I hang my keys up for good. I know myself, and if I started studying these strange events, I won't stop thinking about them. And that wouldn't be good for the job. If I develop a healthy fear about the things I see all the time, well, makes the work impossible. Ignorance is bliss, right? If I sat and really thought about these encounters and what they mean in the grand scheme of things, I would die in that chair. So, while I understand that occult-like things exist in the world, I ain't high enough on the seniority ladder to understand their purpose. And they exist because we exist is the best that I've got. It don't make it any less unsettling, but it adds context that makes it easier to understand. Easier to ignore. If seeing a moth is as likely as seeing a mothman, you can go on with the rest of your day without a care. Well, maybe not if it's the Mothman visiting you. In that case, I'd avoid all bridges just to be safe. It's a long way of saying that I don't spook easily. Take something wild to make my heebies meet my jeebies. But they met recently and it's kept me up most nights. The dread sticks to me like a bad nickname. Most nights I'll nurse a lukewarm coffee and I'll let my mind wander. Try to see if I can stumble into the reason I went through what I did. I've gone as far as throwing I-Ching coins, reading tea leaves, praying to any sort of deities. Pretty much anything you could think of to help divine any understanding of what happened. How these events not only changed the world, but my understanding of our place in it. Let me set the table for ya. I was hauling a bric-a-brac from Atlanta to Vegas and had a tight turnaround schedule. From Vegas, I'd head back east to Chicago and on to the next stop. The company had built in a bonus for an early delivery, and I wanted that extra cash more than I wanted sleep. My foot remained welded to the pedal. I was outside Omaha around midnight. Now Omaha's a fine town, but once you get outside the city limits, well, there ain't much to write home about. The traffic was damn near dead, which is to be expected around that time and place. Traveling through the country's boring stretches at night is a good habit to get into. As I was cruising along the interstate, listening to a book about these sea peoples and the Bronze Age collapse, my eye caught something along the side of the road. At highway speeds, things are seen in blurs. You get shapes and your brain fills in the rest. While details are scant, you have a good idea of what was stalking you. And this go around, it looked like a big dog. I didn't have time to dwell on it because it darted in front of my truck the second I saw it. I didn't swerve, you can't really. Swerving at those speeds with that weight, and you're halfway to jackknifing in the middle of nowhere. I winced and waited for the telltale thump of an animal getting caught under the wheels. It never came. My mirrors didn't show a twitching body on the road. Whatever had taken a chance of dashing out in front of the truck had won the lottery and somehow missed every single one of my tires. I whistled in admiration, tipped my cap to the little fella, and kept on driving. Without realizing it, I had given my gas pedal a bit of a rest, and my speed had dipped down. Nearly crushing an innocent animal will do that to a person. The reduced speed allowed me to get a better view of the things outside my cab, including the person waving me down on the side of the road. I don't normally stop for hitchhikers, some truckers do. I've known solid dudes who are motivated by good deeds and will help in any way they can. I've also heard tales of less savory characters who stop for other, darker reasons. As a profession, long-haul trucking can be a refuge for shady people. It's a hard image to shake in the minds of regular folks. The person hailing me was a young woman in distress, dressed in a dark jacket and pants, not a smart outfit for nighttime hitchhiking, with a yellow knit hat on her mop of black curly hair. She probably wasn't a hitchhiker, but someone in a bad way. As I approached, the more frantic her waving and jumping became, my foot automatically shifted to the brake. I came to the stuttering halt about 10 feet in front of her. Her silhouette was tall in the truck's headlights. She jumped for joy and ran over to my door. I rolled down the window and nodded at the surrounding nothingness. "Oh, thank you for stopping. So many cars have passed me by." "What's going on?" "I was in a crash about 2 miles ahead. Ended up in a ditch and I can't get out. My phone is dead and I can't call a tow truck." You need a lift and a charge." "That'd be amazing. Don't feel super safe standing on the side of the highway in the middle of the night." My dashboard clock told me that I'd have time for a quick stop and still be on track for the bonus. Plus, I was peckish and wouldn't have minded getting a snack. I hit the unlock button and the woman cheered. She ran around the front of my truck. Her shadow passed by the headlights, but the passenger door never opened. I waited for a bit. Climbing into a big rig can be a chore for the uninitiated, but the handle never even twitched. A solid minute passed and there was no movement. I unhooked my seatbelt and slid over to the passenger side door and opened it. No one was there. Her footprints were visible in the loose dirt, boots with no pattern on the sole, but they stopped at the passenger door. I grabbed my flashlight and walked the entire length of the trailer, even glanced underneath it. There was no sign of her anywhere. She had vanished. My stomach twisted and a familiar feeling washed over me. Something unnatural was messing with me. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and headed back to the cab of my truck. The whole time I prayed, whatever this thing was, it didn't jump out of the shadows and attack me. As I got to the driver's side door, my eyes caught the footprints again. They trailed off into the darkness toward the direction where she said her car had wrecked. Despite my animal brain screaming at me to get back inside for safety, I needed to follow these footprints and discover where they went. It was a short walk. The footprints began about 15 feet away, emerging from the ditch along the side of the road. I shone my light down the highway, hoping to have it reflect off her wrecked car, but it just kept traveling uninterrupted into the vast nothingness. A sickening thought bubbled up. What if this was a ploy to get me to leave the safety of the truck? I was in a vulnerable position with little more than a shitty flashlight in my fist to defend myself. That was enough to get me back into the truck. About 10 minutes later, a red flashing icon lit up on my dashboard. My utility lights along the body of my truck had gone out. A quick glimpse in the mirror showed me the dormant bulbs. I don't love driving without the utility lights on, but it wasn't a deal breaker. That bonus kept bouncing around in my head. Not ideal, but not worth stopping. I rolled on. 10 minutes after that, another warning light started glowing, and then another. Finally, my check engine light started glowing and the rig lurched and stuttered. I passed a sign that said a truck stop was 2 miles away. I sighed and saw the bonus money flying away from me, and I hit my blinker. Mother Trucker's Truck World was a chain of compound-style truck stops along the highways and byways of the country. Each one was a sprawling mecca for long haulers. Dozens of pumps, a repair shop, a fully stocked gas station with loads of gear and comfort items, showers, washing machines, fast food places, and sometimes a church. If you have to stop during your run, these are the go-to places. If there was a silver lining to my rig breaking down, it was that it happened near a Mother Trucker's. My engine sputtered and died as I rolled into the station. With the last remaining bit of momentum, I guided it toward the mechanic's garage. It came to a squeaking stop. After calling the company and telling them what had happened and how late I'd be, hopped out of the cab to head inside to talk to the mechanic. But something caught my eye. It was a loose wire still swaying from the drive. It was shredded. I've had damage to my rig over time, but this was new. The wires had been gnawed on as if a rat went to town on them. That wasn't plausible as the lights had went out while I was driving, and no rat can cling to my cab at those speeds, not even Master Splinter. I climbed up to get a closer look. The wires had a sticky greenish-yellow ooze dripping down them and puddling on the metal below. I had never seen anything like that before. I didn't want to touch it because it was still sizzling. No reason to add a personal injury to my already ruined night. I saw you roll in. What happened? It was the station's mechanic. According to his jumpsuit, his name was Boone. Some of the more high-end stops offered around-the-clock mechanics, and with my remaining good luck, I had stumbled into one. He was holding a cup of coffee in one hand and munching on a donut with the other. He was entirely too chipper for as late as it was. I climbed down and nodded back at the wires. It looks like something chewed through the line. Boone leaned in to better assess the frayed wires. Squirrels or rats are the likely culprits. Happens a lot in some of these rigs. Vermin hide and wreck shit when we least expect it. Kinda impressive when you think about it. I wasn't in the mood to be impressed by squirrels. And what vermin leaves a goo on the wires that they chew? A goo? Yeah, look closer, I said, offering to hold his coffee. He handed it to me, finished his donut, and climbed up. He held the wire in his hand and gave a surprised whistle. Ooh, this is a new one on me. Mercy, that's odd. Want to take a gander under the hood? I think whatever got into those lights also got into the engine. He hopped down and took his coffee back. I climbed into the cab and popped the hood latch. Boone shook his head in disbelief. Oh gosh darn, engine's covered in the stuff. I joined him from the other side, and sure enough, the green and yellow goo was everywhere in there. What the hell? The mechanic tapped the goo with the bottom of his coffee cup. It had hardened. He probably did that. Gonna have to take a chisel to it. I'm guessing that's what caused the engine to go kablooey. That probably didn't help the matters, and neither did all the cut wires. Every single one's been chewed through. He pointed at dozens of sliced wires frozen in the hardened amber-like goop. I pulled my shirt sleeve over my hand and tapped my knuckles against it. Solid as a rock. Is there even anything you can do here? What kind of mechanic would I be if I told you no? He said, taking a sip of his coffee. This is a new problem, but even new problems have solutions. Just gotta find it is all. You on a time crunch? I was, but that's all out the window. Sorry to hear. If you can disconnect the cab from the load, I'll get the pusher to bring it around. Start tinkering with it and see what I can find. Gonna be a bit before I have a clue what to tell ya. Truck stop's nice though, lot to do. I'll come find ya. He turned to leave, but I called for him to stop. Hey, you run a wrecker out here by chance? Yeah, we have one, yeah. Usually help the stadies when there's a crash. Why, you see one out there? No, did anybody call for one by chance? I've been quiet as a church fart all night. Anything else, or? I shook my head no, and he left for the garage. I stood there confused. What the hell had infested my truck and ruined it in only a couple dozen miles? There's no way this truck would have started if this had been like this before I left this morning. This happened while I had been driving. The incident with the hitchhiker came to mind, but I pushed that away. A person didn't cause this mess. That said, I'd be lying if I didn't let the thought linger more than I should have. The sighing so loud it woke up the sleeping residents of Omaha. I climbed into the cab to grab a few personal items. I took a seat and started rifling through my cab for my wallet. I leaned back and put my head in my hands. Christ on a bike, do I have shit luck or what? I ran my hands through my hair and headed back into the sleeping berth to grab my backpack. Or I would have if I didn't discover a person cowering under my blanket on my bed. Their trembling, well-worn black Converse were sticking out from the covers. A hide-and-seek champion they were not. They weren't a threat, and people cowering rarely are. But I still wasn't a fan of anyone being inside my truck. I grabbed my blanket and yanked it off to expose a young woman no older than 22 or 23 hiding under the covers. Despite my anger and surprise, I remained calm. She had been crying. Her eyes were swollen and red. Rivers of black mascara had spawned deltas on her ruby cheeks. She was going through some shit. Where is she? Somebody outside screamed. I know she's around here somewhere. She stole my wallet. I glanced over at her and she shook her head no. She silently begged me to stay quiet. Her whole body was trembling. She took back the blanket and tucked herself in. Hey buddy, you see a little blonde tart come through here? I looked down at the quivering mass under my favorite cheetah print blanket before looking back up at the angry trucker. His nose was flat like it had been kicked in, and he had bloody tissue stuffed in his nostrils. A raccoon mask of purple had formed under his eyes. Whoever was hiding in my cab had done a number on this hothead. He was out for blood. Short hair, about 5'2" or so. Yeah, you seen her? She came running out of the truck stop bathroom and convinced some dumb schmo to give her a lift. I think he was driving a lifted Chevy. He tore ass down the freeway. You might be able to catch him if you hurry.
Unbelievable.
Thanks, brother, he yelled, running to his trailerless truck. He was gone seconds later, flying out of mother truckers on a mission. I watched his taillights until they disappeared onto the on-ramp. He's gone, I said. Now, who the hell are you? The woman peeled the blanket down from her face. She broke out into sobs and kept thanking me for not giving her up. I let her tearful spasms end before prodding her again. To aid her speech, I handed her a box of Kleenex, which she eagerly took. After several sinus-clearing blows, she finally spoke. "Claire," she said, her voice still catching. "Thank you." "Okay, Claire," I said. "What's going on and why are you in my truck?" "Sorry, I needed a place to hide. When I saw you were distracted by the mechanic, I hopped in. Assumed you wouldn't come looking if 2 other men were around." "Why were you hiding?" She lowered the blanket and I got my first look at her thin arms. There were a galaxy of black and blue bruises and planets of scarred cigarette burns. She kept her face stern, but tears fell. He was gonna... Jesus Christ, I mumbled. I grabbed my hoodie and gave it to her. She slipped it over her head. Boone was heading back over with a younger second mechanic operating the power pusher. "Come on, let's go inside. It looked like you can do something to eat." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and bounced out of my truck. She was shorter than me by about a foot and weighed about as much as a fly fart, but I wouldn't say she was delicate. Resilient was more apt. She had been through some shit and was still moving. I admired that. The mechanic came up to me and I told him the keys were in the cab. He glanced at the woman and gave me a sly smirk. He leaned in and whispered, "We're gonna need more time than what that'll take, man." "We're getting food," I said. "That's all." He winked. "Hey, of course, of course. And Gus and I will get to working our magic on this thing." I left the 2 to their job and walked with Claire back toward the truck stop. Her eyes kept darting back and forth, and I didn't blame her. "He's gone. I watched him get on the highway. It doesn't mean he won't come back." "Oh, he won't. Cowards always run," I said, holding the door open for her. She hesitated and winced, waiting for a blow that would never come. Eventually, she walked in and mumbled a quick thanks. Jesus, just what had this guy done to her? The truck stop was indeed as nice as the mechanic had made it out to be. Hospital clean with the same kind of lights. The artificially pleasant smell of cooked sandwiches in the air. Fresh fruits shared a shelf space with chocolate-covered nuts and over-caffeinated energy drinks. Signs pointed down small hallways to showers, bathrooms, and the chapel. There were the traditional gas station accoutrements too, but everything in here is supercharged. If you ever needed a dialed-up walking stick or a DVD copy of Rudy, Mother Truckers had you covered. A breezeway led to a fully staffed subway. The entire staff was playing on their phones, bored with even the concept of work. Can't say I blame them. "Hungry?" I said, nodding at the subway. Something small," she said, grabbing a muffin. "Maybe a coffee too." Grab whatever, it's on me." She eyed me. "You sure?" I nodded. She grabbed another muffin. After paying, we took a seat at a booth near the windows at the front of the subway. None of the employees even moved. I had my back against one wall and kept my eyes on the door. I didn't think the guy would come back, but I've been wrong before. If he did, he'd be furious with Claire and pissed at me. His type always wanted to throw hands. I didn't, but I wasn't above it. My fury might only be of the righteous kind, but fury is fury regardless. Claire ate her first muffin in 2 bites. It's clear that she was starving. "Hey, if you want something else to eat," I started. She waved me off. No, it's fine. Just been a little bit since I last ate." "Who was that guy?" I asked, my voice low. A friend of yours, or... A friend, she said, turning to spit on the ground. If I had had a gun, he'd have several new holes in his body. She took a sip of her coffee, savored it, and then swallowed it down. He took me, outside Amarillo. Took you? Yeah, knocked me out, dragged me to his truck, and locked me in a dog cage that he kept in there. The hell? Yeah, he's a psycho. Sweet one minute, and then he put his cigarette out of my arm the next. He would have killed me. She said, her eyes welling up. Told me he was going to do it yesterday. Said it wasn't his first time. I believed him. Why didn't you call the cops? I asked, regretting it as I did. She laughed. Are you serious? As soon as they found out what I do for a living, their investigative drive ends. They ain't calling all cars to find a kidnapped hooker. Half of them think I deserve whatever happens to me, and the other half want a free turn. She took another sip of coffee, her hand shaking. I'm sorry, I said, turning away. A way of the world, she said, tears forming in her eyes again. She wiped them away and forced a smile. You saved my life, bought me these muffins, and I don't even know your name. It's Bird Dog, I said. She laughed. I blushed, but after all this girl had been through, laughing at a weird nickname was fine by me. Well, everybody calls me Bird Dog or BD or Bird. My mama named me Cornelius. She laughed again, harder this time. She had an easy way with it, not something that I was expecting. It was a shame that she had to hide it for so long. Your mama saw you brand new and said, I want to call this little boy, the light of my life, Cornelius. It was a family name. How'd you go from Cornelius to Bird Dog? Oh, Mama gave me that one too, bless her. Always been a curious dude. When I stumble into something that sparks my interest, I'll go deep. Oh, give me an example, she said, taking another sip. Her hands were still shaking, but less so. There's something that'll get my mind moving in a new direction. You like animals? Sure, what can you tell me about animals? Well, I've been reading about how random species form bonds and work together. Like those videos of a lion and a dog becoming friends. I love those. I laughed. Oh, kinda. Symbiosis, like ants and aphids or honey badgers and honey-guide birds. Honey what? So like honeybirds developed an amazing skill to find hidden beehives, but they can't dig them up. It's just not possible with their bodies, kinda like me. I love baseball, but with this gut, I ain't playing shortstop for the Royals anytime soon. Okay, she said, her body relaxing. Right, so honey badgers learned that if they followed the birds, they'll find the hive. Badgers dig up the hive and they eat the honey. The birds come back and eat the wax and the bee larvae. It's a win-win for everyone. A tough break for the bees, though. I laughed at that. Yeah, nature can be cruel like that sometimes, huh? Like I said, it's the way of the world. Claire swallowed down a sip of coffee and sighed. I know this isn't actually good coffee, but right now it tastes amazing. You know what I mean? Oh, that's the dopamine hitting. When you haven't felt it in a while, even small pleasures give oversized responses. You read that in a book too? She asked with a small smile. I shrugged and nodded. I went on a kick about the brain a while back. Not much else to do while driving. Might as well make the most of it by learning something new. Smart, she said, nodding out the window at my rig. What happened to your truck? I shook my head. I don't know, to be honest. My trailer light shorted out when I was driving down the highway. After that, everything started acting wonky. By the time that I hit the off-ramp, I was afraid I'd be stranded. I coasted in here on fumes. Did I hear them say something about goo? I nodded. You wouldn't happen to be an expert on strange goop stuck to engine blocks now, would you? I dropped out of mechanic school right before we covered it, and got a book on the subject that I can borrow. I didn't hear her joke because something outside caught my attention. the woman in the yellow knit cap. She walked from the darkness and into the buzzing lights of Mother Trucker's parking lot. She headed toward the truck station's entrance. My eyes went wide and any semblance of a poker face dropped. Claire clued in. "What's up?" "You see that woman out there in the yellow hat?" "What about her?" I leaned in close. "I know you've gone through some shit today and I don't want to burden you with any more misery, but her showing up is about to send me to the moon." "Is she an ex or something?" "Right before my truck died, I stopped to help her on the side of the road. She told me she had wrecked her car and needed a lift. I agreed, but before she got into my cab, she disappeared." Claire's face screwed up. "What?" Like now you see me, now you don't kind of disappearing." "Are you saying she's a ghost or a magician?" I sighed. "I don't know. My spidey senses are tingling though. I've seen some odd shit out on the road, creatures and the like, but I've never seen the same one twice, let alone in the same night." "Wait, she's the creature." The front door to the truck stop chimed and the woman in the yellow cap walked in. I didn't want her to find me, but I had to know what she was doing here. I inched toward the breezeway and cocked my ear toward the cashier. "Do you guys offer towing?" she asked, her voice sweet and soft. "My car wrecked a few miles away. It's been a long walk." "A mechanic in the garage can help. Name's Boone. He has a beard." "Thank you. Have a better night." A throaty laugh. "Oh, I'll try. Thank you for your help." The door chimed again as the woman in the yellow hat laughed. I sighed. As I turned, one of these subway employees saw me and nodded. He nodded out toward the yellow knit woman and gave me a thumbs up before returning to his phone. I'm glad somebody approved of her because I sure didn't. I slunk back to my seat and ducked low, hoping to stay hidden. I wasn't positive that she had been following me, but the tightness in my gut told me that it was possible. Regardless, I kept my eye on her, searching for anything off about her. Her stride, her clothes, her demeanor. Everything seemed about bored. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to turn toward me and scream bloody murder, but nothing happened. She ignored us and kept her steady pace to the garage. She never even glanced in our direction. "Bird, you okay?" I ignored her. She reached out and touched my hand. That snapped me out of my stupor. "Bird, I don't think she's a ghost. She's just a regular-ass lady." I shook my head. "There was no wreck." "What?" She told the cashier that her car wrecked too, but there wasn't a wreck anywhere near this place. "Oh," Claire said. "That is a little odd then. Why would she lie? What's her endgame? Maybe she's a scammer. I know a few girls who honey trap record drivers. Good money if you have the stomach for it." The woman reached the garage, smiled, and waved to the guys inside. She spoke some, but was too far away to catch any of it. My legs itched to get closer, but the monkey survival lobes in my brain wouldn't let me. Ancestors holding up their hands and warning me to stay back. Dread creeping up my spine and infesting my thoughts on an atomic level despite not having a rational reason why. This woman wasn't some massive brute with evil intent in her eyes, not some ghoul who had wanted to devour my soul. Still, I couldn't shake the buzzing in my skull that something was off about her, that she was a menace in tennis shoes. With my nerves firing, she happily walked into the garage. I waited, my eyes unblinking, for the fireworks to explode. But nothing happened. I let my shoulders roll back and laughed. A sigh escaped. Claire knit her brows. "What were you expecting?" "I don't know, violence maybe." Claire laughed. "Oh, from her, the little woman outside. What was she gonna do, blind them with her Julia Roberts smile?" Blood rushed to my cheeks. Something's off about her, that's all. "Bird, no offense, but maybe you scared her." "What?" I said halfway to a snit. Not on purpose, but maybe after seeing you she had second thoughts. We've all been there, it's coded into our DNA. But I wanted to help. Consider the situation. A pretty woman getting into a semi with a stranger in the middle of the night. It might have rung an alarm bell in her head. A woman's intuition may have been screaming at her to run and hide. True crime stories all start out that way. Nice guy willing to help until... She trailed off. I hadn't even thought of that. Occam's razor insisted it was significantly more likely than her being a monster. I had seen monsters and they never wore a stylish yellow knit cap. And despite my smiling demeanor, a woman being afraid of a strange man on the side of the highway in the dead of the night made perfect sense. You're probably right, I said to Claire. Probably just gave her a fright. Well, that's because she saw Cornelius and not Bird. You're giving the name Cornelius a lot of street cred it may not deserve. She laughed and it was infectious. I started chuckling too. For a fleeting moment, normalcy returned to the truck stop. A wonderful and welcome calm. A funny thing about calm, though, is that it often precedes a storm. The spotlight, a bright white light, hit the gas pumps as a truck cab came crashing into the parking lot. Came to a screeching halt and the driver's side door whipped open. Claire gasped. The man had returned. He'd actually come back. Holy shit, she mouthed, tipping back on her chair. Holy shit. Where is she? He screamed. His eyes were wild and he was holding a crowbar in his hand and had every desire to use it. Scanning the subway windows, he spotted Claire and me sitting together. He grinned and pointed the crowbar at us. Oh, you're both gonna get it now. He took a step toward us but hesitated as a loud electric pop boomed from the garage. A burst of light that temporarily turned night into day. The power inside the garage and half the subway winked out. Who done messed up the power now? Joked the subway employee. The rest of his coworkers gave him a chorus of uneasy laughter. The joke ended when someone in the garage screamed a string of curse words. Words so vile you would assume the speaker was trying to raise a demon. A second later, the younger mechanic came stumbling out of the garage, holding the side of his neck and screaming that something bit him. His hand slipped and an arc of arterial spray leapt from the wound and coated the subway's windows. The lethargic crew snapped into panic, screaming and running into the back of the store. The younger mechanic collapsed to his knees, the flow of blood lessening to a trickle. His eyes rolled back into his head and he fell face first onto the pavement. He was dead before gravity had finished the fall. We both shot up, Claire instinctively sliding behind my body. Her hand grabbed my shirt and squeezed it tight. Fat drops of blood rolled down the window, carving crimson rivers on the glass. What the hell? She shrieked behind me. The angry trucker's resolve faltered and he loosened his grip on the crowbar. It clattered against the ground. The noise woke the man from his stupor and he took a cautious first step back toward his truck. His revenge against Claire was put on hold. Boone came running out of the garage. He was screaming in pain and if there were words mixed in, it was impossible to find them. He took about 3 steps out of the garage before something blurry sprinted out and kicked him square in the back. Boone went flying, his head snapping back so violently that it was impossible for his spine not to have snapped. I assumed he was dead before his body crashed into a fuel pump, jarring it loose from the cement. My eyes shifted from Boone's body to whatever had kicked him. It was dark and a hair bigger than a German Shepherd. I couldn't make out any other details because it moved with hummingbird-like speed. My brain didn't have time to even process what it had done, but I had seen it before on the side of the road. The woman in the yellow hat strolled out of the garage. She had streaks of blood across her face and clothes. By the way she casually strutted, it was clear that the blood didn't bother her. In fact, she forced a big smile at the trucker standing stock still in the parking lot. "Stay away from me," he said, his voice shaky. He reached down and grabbed his crowbar. It rattled in his tremulous hand. She put her hands on her hips and stuck her lip out in a world-class pout. Well, that's not a nice thing to say to a lady. He took another step back. Stay the hell away from me. She didn't listen. Another step toward him. Or what? I'll kill you. She started cackling. Oh, no, you won't. Not because you're not capable, but because you can't stop me. She smiled widely as Boone's blood rolled down her cheeks. There was a blur as something zipped past him and disappeared into the darkness. A growing piss stain grew on the man's pants. He ran and hopped into his truck. As he shifted into drive, the headlights cut off. He pressed on the gas and the truck lurched forward a foot but rolled to a stop. He beat on the steering wheel and he screamed. The hood exploded off the truck. It went spinning high into the air, tumbling end over end, before smashing down on the truck's roof. Green ooze poured out of the front of the grill, hardening mid-drop right before it hit the concrete. The hothead was trapped. He struggled to free himself, but the hood had pinned his arm against the seat. His eyes widened in panic. Veins in his forehead pulsed as he ripped at his trapped arm. It didn't budge. Desperate, he took the crowbar and turned it against himself, smashing it against the broken bones in hopes that he could rip it away and run. It didn't matter. The wolf couldn't spring his paw from the trap. The trucker stared at the woman in the knit cap and spat out dozens of vile curses at her. She only smiled and waved. I hope it hurt, Claire spat. The blurry dog creature leapt from the engine block and merged with the woman. As soon as it had entered her body, there was an explosion of white light and we all shielded our eyes. When our vision came back, the woman began to pulsate. She dropped to her knees, roaring and screaming as all of her limbs elongated 3 feet. Her torso widened to the size of an oil barrel, and ropey muscles rippled down her entire body. Her face followed her limbs and elongated to a point like a stork's beak. Small hooked horns emerged and encircled her skull, creating a laurel of razor-sharp bone. She shook her body and green and yellow feathers emerged from her skin, shimmering in the remaining light of the truck stop. The plumage blew back and forth in the breeze. As she snorted and a glob of that green and yellow goo shot from her nostrils to one of the pumps. It instantly hardened, crushing the metal from the pressure. And gas leaked from the base of the pump, first in spurts but then in a steady stream that flooded the parking lot. The creature stood, towering over the semi-truck, taller than the building that we were in. She raised her beaked head, opened her mouth, and let out a low, rumbling call. An alligator's growl pitched down several octaves. It shook the entire building. The subway windows shattered, sending glass flying toward us. Claire and I scooted away from the falling daggers but didn't run. Curiosity kept me in place. Revenge cemented her to the ground. The man in the truck was screaming, and thanks to the shattered glass, it was crystal clear. I can't imagine what he was thinking, staring down this thing just waiting for the inevitable. How confident was he that he'd get away? Apparently, he was super confident because he didn't stop smashing at his arm. The more he turned his radio bone into dust, the more he jerked it back and forth, praying that it would tear away. Crackling bones and ripping sinew and muscle echoed across the lot. Against all odds, the man wrenched his body free. Half his arm remained pinned to the seat. Blood sprayed from his stump, but he didn't dwell on the wound. He stumbled out of his truck, but his fear caused him to misstep, and he fell face first onto the ground. When he pushed himself up with his one hand, his nose flatter and pouring blood, the woman placed her arms on either side of him and lowered her beak. She croaked out another howl, blowing the man's stringy hair all over her. His scream stopped when she drove her beak into his eye socket. With the squelch of a plucked eyeball as our background noise, I uttered, What the hell are we gonna do? It was meant to stay in my brain, but the pure fear in my blood forced the sentiment out of my mouth. From somewhere high above the gas station, another low, rumbling call echoed in the night. The woman raised her beak, snapping off the trucker's head, and called back to their skyward pal. A gust of wind sent debris flying as another one of these monsters dropped right in front of the subway glass. The young mechanic's dead body was between its long legs. The creature nudged the corpse with its beak. When it was satisfied the mechanic was dead, it drove its beak into the body, ripping open his stomach and greedily devoured the innards. "We should move," I whispered, gently tugging on Claire's arm. We moved deeper into the truck stop and away from the broken windows. Claire moved softly and quietly, avoiding the shards of broken glass as if they were lava. I do not have a dancer's grace, and with my attention on these monster birds chomping on the bodies of the dead, I wasn't paying as close attention to where I was stepping. The snap and crunch of glass under my boot was as loud as the Chernobyl explosion. Both creatures turned to us, their eyes large and yellow and squinted. The pupils shrank in the remaining light from the subway. I froze. Maybe they couldn't spot us. We stilled our breath. Only the gentle spraying of leaking gas and the short growls from a curious monster were audible. The newest arrival took a step toward the broken window. Its long arm reached into the truck stop and dropped a mere foot from us. The long appendage ended in a 9-inch grappling hook-like claw. It tapped, and the claw hit against the tile, attempting to flush out any prey. We leaned back as far as our balance would allow. Claire was gripping my shirt and started twisting it as her nerves went into overdrive. It got so tight that it restricted my breathing. A second scan. "Screw this!" yelled the cashier from behind the front counter. The front door chimed, followed by hurried footsteps across the wet asphalt. The cashier was making a break for it. I wanted to scream for them to stop, to have some common sense, but self-preservation kept my lips sealed. The woman in the yellow cap's attention left the half-eaten trucker and went to more fresh game. She let out a slow, deep rumble that made the ground quiver. Inside the truck stop, objects fell off shelves and glass broke. Some lights popped, while others vibrated out of their screws and crashed to the ground. There was a bright, white light forming in the middle of the creature's chest, and that quickly overtook all the darkness. I clenched my eyes shut, but the light still danced on my eyelids, creating an orange glow in my conscious mind. The car engine firing up made me open my eyes. The creature had transformed back into a woman. In front of her was the blurry dog-like creature that had merged with her earlier. She pointed at the car and the creature sprinted and took to the air. It flattened itself into a thin strand, squeezed through the grill's gaps and into the engine. The car started and stopped, smoke pouring up from the cracks. The hood exploded off the car, a thin trail of hardening green goo following behind it. A vibrating blurry dog followed the hood out of the car and merged with the woman once more. She stumbled back and dropped onto the gas-covered ground again. Her body twisted and trembled as she transformed back into the monster. The cashier abandoned his dead car and took off on foot. And they didn't get that far. The second creature moved away from Claire and me and flew at the sprinting man. It landed with a ground-shaking thud of those grappling hook claws catching the cashier's shoulders and driving his body against the concrete. I turned away from the violence, but it didn't matter. The ripping of flesh and muscle and the painful scream painted a vivid picture in my mind. "Let's go into the walk-in freezer," Claire said, yanking at my arm. A thought bubbled in my brain folds. Why had the woman spared me on the side of the road but killed these guys? And then it came to me like a divine message. It didn't attack me because it was weak. What? I turned to Claire, my brain knitting a conspiracy that brought everything together. This woman didn't attack me earlier because it was weak. The blurry dog-like thing was weak. It needed power to strengthen. Electrical power, mechanical power. Like from your truck's engine, Claire said, picking up the thread. Once charged, it could merge with her and transform into those. That makes sense. What can we do with that information? I don't know. Maybe we shut off the power to the building and starve those things and they'll leave. Leaving lets them do this again. We have to stop them. Claire, I'm a long-haul trucker, not a monster hunter. I don't have any idea what to do here. She nodded at the growing pond of gasoline. What if we get them into the gas and light it on fire? If fire burns everything, monsters included. I shrugged. Well, that's as good as anything I've got. How do we lure them there? Bait, she said. I hated that I agreed because I understood I needed to be the worm on the hook. I had been the one who interacted with the yellow-cap woman. Unknowingly or not, I brought her to mother truckers. She had hitched her out of my truck and killed several innocent people. I felt responsible. The sinking feeling in my gut would never leave if I didn't atone for my sins. We need to find a lighter. They have a case of Zippos near the cash register, Claire said. Okay, I said, my voice not instilling the confidence I had hoped to portray. She paused. You okay with this? No, I said honestly, but we're out of ideas and the thought of these things killing anybody else here is all the motivation I need. I'm responsible for these things, these deaths. She reached out and clutched my arm. We locked eyes and I withered in her stare. She forced me to meet her gaze and with some assistance, I brought my eyes level with hers again. No, you're not. You're as much a victim as any of us. You didn't ask for this, you didn't seek it out. Bad things happen when you least expect them, she said. If anyone can speak on that confidently, I think it's me. Claire had somehow channeled Vince Lombardi and it was exactly what I needed to hear. I grabbed at any remaining resolve that I had hidden within my soul and I went to grab a Zippo. As I rounded the corner, somebody called out to me from behind the subway counter. A terrified employee poked their head up, their eyes wild with fright. What the hell's going on out there? Monsters, I said. God damn, you serious? And 2 of them. They killed 4 people. I knew I should have taken that job at Cold Stone. The extra drive would have been worth it. How many people are with you? 4. Is that everyone who was in there? Except for David, the cashier at the front. He's well, I said, trailing off. The point landed without the guidance of my words. Damn, the employee said. What are you doing? I think I know how to stop them. Crap, you kill all these things and I'll give you cold cut combos for life, bro. Are you sure there wasn't anybody else in the store? No, but probably not. This time is usually dead, he said, instantly regretting his words. I mean slow. Okay, whatever you do, stay in the freezer. Don't gotta tell me twice. Best of luck, bro, the employee said before crab walking away to spread the word. I snuck through the breezeway and into the truck stop proper. From where I was standing, I had a clear view of the creatures outside. And they were chewing on body parts. The wet slap of intestines flopping against the ground turned my stomach. I swallowed down my disgust and tiptoed toward the Zippo case. My fingers found one with the skull emblazoned on the front. That felt appropriate. Either we'd end with them or they'd end us. Death comes for us all but rarely gives us a heads up. Today, death was skywriting the message for everyone to read. I hustled back and handed the lighter to Claire. I'll sneak out the back of the building and walk around. As soon as both of them are in the gas, throw the lighter in and run for the walk-in freezer for cover. This place is going up like a firecracker. What are you gonna do? Run for my life and pray that nothing lands on me. I turned to leave, but her arm found mine. You're a brave man, bird dog. The word you're looking for is dumb. I said with a smile. No, it's not, she said, her voice shaky. You were brave from the jump. You offered help without wanting anything in return. Claire, She stopped me from speaking more. No time. I'll see you on the other side, okay? Nodding, I left her and headed for the back exit. My heart thrummed with a measured rhythm. The pump jack that just keeps churning as long as there's still oil to be found. My nerves were so frayed that I'd come back around to being steady again. Having a task allowed me to focus all my energy on that and nothing else. I'd always been great at compartmentalization, but this was the ultimate test. The final boss of my brain's ability to focus. If I survived this, I'd be able to watch 10 skinwalkers royal rumble on the side of the road and not have it bother me one whit. The air was chilly outside. The temperature had dropped a good 10 degrees since I'd first arrived, and the goosebump brigade marched down my body. I stayed close along the wall, not wanting to venture out an inch beyond where I needed to be. I couldn't let them find me before I was in position. It was deathly quiet, and the only noises that found my ears were the wind blowing through the surrounding fields and the occasional bone-rattling call from these creatures. I glanced out at the field directly behind the truck stop. The silvery moonlight fell on nothing but flat grassland. The urge to run gripped me, and I had to physically stop myself. People were depending on me. I may not make it, but I'd rather go down swinging than live knowing that I left others to die when I could have helped them. I rounded the corner of the garage and a wall of gasoline fumes surrounded me. In small doses, the smell was tolerable, but when a lake's worth of gas hits your olfactory system, Lord help you. My eyes watered and the vapor burned my throat. I tried putting my shirt over my face like a mask, but it didn't help me. I slid my body to the edge of the wall. The cinder block was cold against my back. Peeking around the corner, I saw the creatures gobbling up the remains of their last victims. The surrounding concrete was slick and stained with crimson. The pang of guilt rang throughout my body, but I did my best to ignore it. Finish the job now, be sad later. That mantra worked for everything from breakups to firings. Why couldn't it work for monster hunting too? Peeling off the wall, I used the husk of my dead truck as cover to spy on these things. They were lumbering beasts, moving slowly, bellies full of truck stop patrons. They lowed to one another, having a conversation in guttural growls. I glanced over at the subway window. Claire was nervously turning the lighter over in her hand. Sighing, I readied myself to come around the corner when there was a burst of bright white light that illuminated the landscape. Even though it only lasted a few seconds and I shielded my eyes with my hand, it still scrambled up my rods and cones. When the darkness rushed back, I was temporarily blinded. I rubbed my eyes as if I were trying to erase a mistake. When I opened them, my vision was filled with floaters bouncing around. I shut them again and counted to 10, hoping to chase away the ghosts. It didn't work. The floaters were visible in my mind's eye too. There's more. I can smell them, the woman in the yellow cap said with a cheerful lilt.
Me too,
said a deeper male voice. I opened my eyes, the floaters finally fading, and I peeked around my truck. An Adonis had joined the woman in the cab, dressed in an outfit that wouldn't have been out of place in the Brady Bunch. He was a man out of time, a fossil reconstituted into living flesh. How long have these things been feasting in our world? Should I call the others to feed? She asked. And the man didn't respond. He stopped and scanned the building. His eyes were on the lookout for something or someone specific. Not wanting to be found, I pulled myself back behind the truck. From the corner of my eye, 2 gray blurs sprinted past and ran for the illuminated gas price sign. They may have moved on 4 legs like a dog, but they weren't a living thing. More like a focused beam of crackling energy. They snapped and popped as they zipped past. The edges of their bodies were fuzzy, like the great artist in the sky had tried to blend them into the surrounding air. They moved as if they were displacing the atoms in front of them and not a physical part of this world. They leapt up to the top of the sign and flattened against it. As they did, the bulbs dimmed and burst, their gray skin taking on a more greenish glow. They slid down the sign, sapping the power as they did and leaving a trail of that concrete-like goo in their wake. Once they hit the ground, they took off in opposite directions, encircling the entire truck stop. I ducked into the garage, careful not to draw any unwanted attention to myself. Initially, I wasn't sure what they were doing. If they wanted more food, there was still plenty of obvious electricity to dine on. I glanced at some of the hardened goo in my engine block, and the tumblers clicked. They weren't looking for food anymore. They were looking for us. They were the honeybirds to the yellow-cap woman and Adonis's honey badger. And that made us the bees. Without these things inside them, they couldn't transform into the body-crunching monsters that had been terrorizing us. In their quest for the next hive to uncover, they were vulnerable. This was my moment. I swallowed, shook my head, and sprinted out of the garage. Hey, I was wondering if you two could. Hey, I know you. You gave me a lift to the gas station, the yellow-cap woman said with a wide, friendly smile. In a matter of speaking anyway, you'd be surprised how easy it is to hide on one of those trucks. What are you? You wouldn't believe me if I told you, she said. No one ever does. They were on the opposite shore of the gas pond and hadn't ventured out any further. If our plan was going to work, I'd need to draw them closer. And to do that, I was going to have to get into the gas as well. And so I did. Try me. I'm a curious guy and well, this is the weirdest thing that I've ever seen in my life. Well, if I tell you, we'll have to kill you, she said in a sing-songy way. Kinda the rules. Can't let the secret break containment into the wider world. Another step closer. The gas seeping into my shoes and socks now. It was cold against my skin. I blocked it out. I assume you're gonna kill me. I can't run and my truck's toast. And I saw what you did to that poor cashier when they tried to flee. That was a dumb thing for him to do, huh? My friend here hadn't eaten one of you in so long, and then here comes fast food sprinting onto his plate, she said with a smile. Though fast may not be the right word. Did you even break a sweat, dear? No, the man said, eyeing me. He took a step closer, leaving the concrete beach and dipping his toes into the gas. And I'm still hungry. It's been a while since he's been here, and you can tell by his clothes. Your species' plumage moves so quickly, so much easier on other planets. We'll need to update them after if we want to blend in, she said, following the man into the pond. I would say we'd take years, but I don't think they'd fit. You're a bit more healthy than my friend here. Ignoring the barb, I shuffled back again, drawing them deeper. Despite the cool night air gently blowing, sweat beaded on my forehead. I was waiting, dreading, for the moment that their fuzzy scouts returned. That's when things would get real. You aren't from Earth, she laughed. We've always had access to Earth and many, many other hunting grounds. Another step into the gas. You're hunters. Oh, if that helps you, sure, she said. Another step and she was fully inside the gas puddle now. It's not much of a hunt with your kind, the man said, joining the woman in the deeper part of the puddle. Simple creatures with the survival instincts of a gnat. Oh, he's not wrong, she said, continuing their march toward me. I mean, half of you just offered yourselves up. If I didn't know any better, I would swear you wanted to die. From behind them, their fuzzy companions returned. The woman and the man felt their presence and smiled. "Looks like your time just expired. If you want to make it sporty, why don't you start running now?" I took a step back, 1 foot out of the gas, and I contemplated running. I glanced at the subway window and found Claire flicking the Zippo open. The sparking wheel brought forth a bright orange flame. Our salvation. I smiled. "You know how humans became the head of the food chain on our planet?" "Enlighten me," the woman said, taking another step. "Our ancestors did 2 things really well. The first was to be curious about the world around them. Sure, some of them died, but lessons were learned and passed on to the next generation." And then the second, the man asked, joining the woman in the middle of the pond. "The second, we took stupid risks." She smiled. "On that, we can agree." The fuzzy creatures leapt into the bodies of the man and woman. They fell on all fours as their human bodies began to twist and transform. I locked eyes with Claire and screamed, "Now!" She hurled the lighter and it spun end over end. The flame flickered in the breeze, but it never went out. It landed at the edge of the pond and skidded into the gas puddle. Instantly, the flame ignited the pond, sending a massive orange and blue wave of fire racing over every inch of the gas. I ran out, but not before I witnessed our triumph. The monsters ignited. Their screams were instant, painful, and loud. Their bellowing shattered any remaining glass. They thrashed on the ground, their long limbs smashing into the building and snapping their delicate bones. And the heat melted nearby goo. It reeked as it softened and bubbled on the ground. Even the vomit-inducing smell of roasting bodies was an improvement over the putrid stench of the rapidly liquefying goo. With the wave coming at me, I took off in a full sprint out into the wilderness, but I wasn't fast enough. My gas-soaked shoes and socks burst into flames. The burn rippled through my feet and up my legs. My nostrils filled with the smell of burning leather and charred skin. It blistered and cracked. I dropped and yanked off my shoes and socks, but it didn't matter. The fire was chewing through my clothes. I violently rolled back and forth on the ground, trying to smother any remaining flames in my body. I was still rolling in the grass when the pumps exploded. They went hurtling through the air like a hillbilly rocket. And gravity, being undefeated on Earth, sent the heavy pumps back down onto the squirming and burning monsters. The squish was satisfying. My legs throbbed. The pain was unbearable. Black came to the edges of my eyes, and I was rapidly approaching unconsciousness. Before my eyes shut, though, I caught Claire and the subway employees running away from the intensifying fire. But they weren't sad or scared. They were cheering. Despite the heat and flames and danger all around her, Claire was smiling. It was the perfect image to see before I faded to black. When it was all said and done, everything at Mother Trucker's burned to ash. Officially, it was a horrific accident. All the surviving victims told the same story. The mechanic had accidentally clipped the pump, causing the explosion. Several people died, but only 2 horribly charred bodies were pulled from the scene. The fire had completely erased the other victims from existence. It was a sad story, and it made the national news. None of us ever spoke to the press beyond expressing gratitude that we had survived. My burns were pretty severe, and I spent the next several months off the road and recovering. I lost touch with Claire and the rest of them. We swore we'd still talk, but deep down we didn't believe that we would. The chance had brought us together when we had needed each other the most, and that alone was a miracle. Another strange happening in a life full of them. I hope wherever they are, they're doing well. I never received my lifetime of cold cut combos either. And during my recovery, I spent a lot of time reading about interdimensional science. I can safely say I have little idea of how it may work. From what I gathered, there are theories about branching universes and theoretically, we may be able to travel in between them. How, why, or anything else is lost on me. At a certain point, when all the science was coming across like another language, I threw in the towel. I got the gist. This kind of travel could happen. Science may not have proved it yet, but I meet beings that claim they did. If I tried telling anybody that, well, they'd throw old bird dog into a padded cell. That they came to this world was horrifying enough. But what really keeps me awake on those nights when the moon is high, what has turned my understanding of the world upside down more so than any other weird thing that I've ever seen, is the fear that they might come back. God help us if they do. My husband and I are both people persons. I used to work at the maternity ward at a local hospital while he's a private trainer at a popular gym downtown. He always has a story to tell about the many strange people that he meets in his line of work, but it's never mean-spirited. He shares the occasional anecdote or bizarre quote. People say the darndest things. Not too long ago, I lost my job at the hospital. They were restructuring the maternity ward. Most people were reassigned or fired. It was tough finding something new, but even tougher to stay positive. While my husband went on and on about the many interesting characters that he had met, I had little to share but what jobs I had applied to. After 2 months of searching, my husband had a proposition. Turns out one of his regulars had need for a private nurse. I'm using a fake name here to keep some semblance of privacy, as what I'm about to tell you relates to his medical history. Let's call this client Lucas. Lucas is not the kind of person you think would have need for on-site medical assistance. He's in his early 40s and has exceptional physical health. Since the reason behind his need for a nurse was very much a personal health matter, my husband had no idea what the job was really about. There was nothing obviously wrong with Lucas. "You can just talk to him," my husband said. "If you don't like it, that's fine." I was very against it at first, but after 2 months of rejection letters, or no letters at all, I was willing to give anything a shot. It'd be nice to have something new to talk about, to share an equal scoop of, you'll never guess what happened at work today, at the dinner table. So my husband set up a meeting. I met Lucas at his mansion one late October afternoon. The sun was already setting, but it was the only time that he was off work. Lucas worked at least 10 hours a day, sometimes more, and often on the weekends. Still, it afforded him the luxury of a high-end lifestyle, with the cars and housing to go with it. Parking my Toyota in his driveway felt like an insult, and the check engine light taunted me. Lucas came out to meet me with a hand outstretched. He was tall and athletic, with thick, bottle cap-like glasses. He covered his bald head with a black baseball cap, proudly displaying the company logo. I won't share what it is, but you would recognize it. Guaranteed. I shook his hand and took a good look at him. I could tell that behind his perfectly white teeth and upper body strength, this man was exhausted. The eyes couldn't lie about that. "Thank you for coming along," Lucas said. "If you're half as fantastic as your husband is telling me, we're gonna get along just fine. If I were even half as fantastic as my husband says, I'd be running this country," I laughed. but thank you. He gave me a quick tour of his 3-bedroom house, taking the time to acquaint me with his lifestyle. Apart from work, he didn't do much. Working out, going on the occasional hunting trip, swimming. Lucas worked remotely as a sort of liaison for a multinational company and had to be on standby if there was anything major going down. He spent a lot of time writing messages in relation to major shareholders and handled at least 2 major investment relations. It was high-stakes work with hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs on the line. If I make a bad call, we could inadvertently shut down a small town in New England, he said. And that's not an exaggeration. That's an actual problem right now. And there it was. That was the quote that I was bringing home to the dinner table. It felt good to be back. After the tour, Lucas sat me down in the kitchen and offered me a glass of carrot juice. His kitchen was bigger than my living room, and it seemed like half the cabinets were empty. The man had 6 types of freshly pressed juice ready to go. Well, you seem to have it all figured out, I smiled. I can't imagine why you would need a trained health professional. I get why you would think that, said Lucas, polishing his glasses. But I have a condition and it's starting to become a concern. I need someone with experience and, discretion. Well, of course, I said. Patient confidentiality extends to nurses. So any and all conditions that I may or may not have stays between us. Well, absolutely. I took a sip of the carrot juice, feeling a bit of a sting. I coughed. There's some chili in there, he smiled. It's spicier than it looks. We walked out to the terrace overlooking his backyard. He had a nice, handmade furniture set along with a barbecue, but I could tell that it hadn't been used in a while. The view was pretty neat though. There was a large open space with a decently cut lawn. You could see the edge of town to the east, and a vast forest to the west. Birch mostly. There are all kinds of sleep disorders, he said. People who talk, walk, or scream in their sleep. Some don't sleep at all. I have something similar and I need someone to make sure that I'm okay. Well, that sounds serious. Are we talking about sleep apnea or something? I got these pills, right? Lucas said, rattling a pill bottle. It's like turning off a light. Knocks me out cold. It's the only way that I can sleep without being a danger to myself. But they're a pain in the butt. Side effects are nasty. What happens if you don't take them? Well, that's what you're here for, Lucas sighed. I have a form of hypernoctambulism, and this is where Lucas informed me of his ailment. Up until that point, I had never heard of it. A lot of people know about sleepwalking, but this was much more severe. Hypernoctambulism, or in more common words, sleep running. It sounded absurd. He showed me to his bedroom. While the rest of his house was tidy, this place was a mess. His king-sized bed looked like it hadn't been made in weeks. There were pill bottles on the nightstand, along with the gadgets and clothes strewn across half the bed. He had nailed some sort of straps to the side of the bed, and he had a mouth guard next to his pillow. I frequently run into things, he said. I knocked out a tooth once. I gotta take precautions. He explained the various ways that he tried to control it. Strapping himself down would work sometimes, unless he had managed to worm his way out. He had tried literal chains and handcuffs, but he just ended up hurting himself. His bruises would get so bad that they eventually broke through the skin. He showed me scars along his arms. I move so much that it chafes all the way through, he said. It gets a bit better with the Velcro straps, but they're easier to get out of. He showed me his turquoise sleeping shoes. Since he could take off running, he would often hurt his feet. Waking up at the side of the road with bloody soles was a nightmare in and of itself. I could tell this was a major part of his life. He told me at length about the many ways that he had tried to fix it, and he always came back to that pill bottle. He hated it. It wore him out and left him feeling dazed all day long, which was starting to affect his work. Lucas needed someone to check up on him a few nights a week to make sure that he could sleep without taking those pills, and without hurting himself. "I figured you could help," he said. "Maybe you have some ideas. Don't you have any recommendations from a physician?" This is it," he said, rattling the pill bottle. "But it's just not working out." "Well, then I guess I'd have to see it. Figure out what I'm up against." "So you're on board then?" I was. We agreed on a trial period. We'd start with 3 nights a week, and if it all turned out well, we would increase it to 5. Lucas was okay with taking his pills every now and then, but he wanted as many nights as possible without them. His job was very demanding, and the side effects of the sleeping pills were nasty enough to completely kill his momentum. Sure, sleep running took its toll as well, but at least he got a proper REM cycle out of it, except when he hurt himself. Eventually, we parted ways. We shook hands, and I made my way home. While I couldn't tell my husband about Lucas's actual condition, I was eager to talk about my day as a whole. It felt good to contribute to the discussion around the dinner table. Things were balanced again, and I decided then and there that I would do whatever it takes to make this work. I needed this. But there was that itch in the back of my mind that told me this wasn't normal. I had never heard of this condition, and it seemed more than just unusual. I could deal with working nights, but I wasn't prepared for what this job might really entail. I had a feeling it was spicier than expected. And 2 days later, I returned to help Lucas with his first session. I arrived at 9 p.m. and he had already prepared by then. I hadn't planned my sleeping schedule ahead as well as I should have, so I stocked up on mango-flavored energy drinks and chocolate-covered nut bars. Lucas also reminded me that I was free to drink as much fresh-pressed juice as I'd like. He called it a night at around 10 p.m. sharp. He seemed a bit uncomfortable going to bed without strapping himself in, but he kept his sleeping shoes on. Despite all preparations, I felt like I had no idea what was really coming. Lucas seemed genuinely distraught, like he was gearing up for a marathon. He turned on a white noise playlist and turned on the lights, and he asked me to wait outside. "It usually doesn't start right away," he said. "Check in on me in a while." As I left, he cleared his throat and looked up from his pillow. "And close the doors. All of them, just in case." Lucas had an alcove in the hallway outside his bedroom, where he had set up 2 recliners with a table in between. It was insanely comfortable and a perfect setup for reading or listening to audiobooks. Lucas told me that he was okay with me bringing something to do while I waited, so I had stocked up on podcasts. As the hours passed by, it was difficult to imagine what would happen next. It was just past midnight when I heard a strange noise coming from the bedroom, like a shrill groan, slow and drawn out, and then footsteps quickly approaching. I barely had the time to take off my headphones before something slammed into the bedroom door, rattling the paintings on the wall. I could hear Lucas getting up and running back and forth, like a fly trying to get out of an open window. Finally, he gave the bedroom door another smack. This time it gave way. His eyes had rolled back in his skull, and his mouth was wide open. His head was flopping back and forth like a dead fish, and his arms hung haplessly at his side. It was as if he was being pulled forward by the torso, only using his legs to keep up. For a second, he just stood there, as if pondering his options. And then he started running. I didn't know whether to get out of the way or to tackle him, and so I did neither. Instead, he just passed me by, smacking my shoulder as he went along. He hurried down the stairs, clearing 3 steps at a time, and slamming into a wall as these stairs curved to the left. Some kind of diploma came tumbling down, covering the steps in glass. A good thing you wore shoes. I ran after him, and I didn't even notice that I was calling out to him, trying to grab his attention. I know it is said that you shouldn't wake a sleepwalker unless necessary, but he was hurting himself. I had to at least try something. I followed him throughout his house as his flailing arms knocked over every piece of curio along the way. He groaned the entire time, the noise being interrupted with every forceful step like a stalling engine. He accidentally pushed the doors to the terrace open and he ran out into the backyard. I followed him, but he was much faster than anticipated. Seeing him out there was unreal. It felt like a bad dream. He looked like a flesh puppet being pulled along by invisible strings, stumbling forward with what little control that he had left. It wasn't random either. He was going in a straight line, as if towards something. I tried to keep up, but I couldn't run with the same reckless abandon. He was getting away and I was already getting winded. As he reached the edge of the birch forest, his poor motor skills caught up with him as he ran headlong into a birch tree. By the time that I got to him, he was having some sort of micro seizures. He wasn't breathing. I had left my phone upstairs and I couldn't call for help, so I had to act fast. I rolled him onto the side, put my arm under his head and started smacking him between the shoulder blades. 3 or 4 smacks later, I heard his breathing return as slow and steady. He was okay. Lucas took his pills and he dreamlessly passed the night. We scheduled another trial 2 days from then, giving me some time to process what had happened and to plan ahead. I had never seen anything like this before. I was no stranger to patients having seizures or wandering off in a stupor, but this seemed coordinated, purposeful even. 2 days later, I met with Lucas again, a bit earlier this time, so we had time to discuss precautions and what steps to take. I could tell that he was having trouble concentrating, probably a side effect from taking the pills. He had trouble making complete sentences. I didn't have a lot of ideas, just strapping him in would be a temporary fix, but I figured we needed something more permanent. As Lucas stepped outside to take a phone call, I wandered around his house looking for inspiration, and I found something. I don't know if it was brilliance or stupidity, but Lucas had a home gym. Among his possessions were this state-of-the-art treadmill. It was wide enough for 2 people to fit and had tons of settings, including a dynamic speed based on how fast you're running. When Lucas came back, I pointed at it. "Have you tried setting this up?" I asked. "You could run for hours on this thing." "I can't really control it," he said, "but you could try guiding me onto it." "You think that's crazy?" No way," he smiled. "Quite the opposite." We moved it up and set up a dynamic speed and placed it by his bed. We had it in direct line from bed to door, hoping that he would run straight onto it. I also suggested covering the door in protective foam and installing a bolt lock on the outside, something so that he couldn't accidentally open it from the inside. He was very receptive, and even though it was all just loose ideas, he wrote it all down. Lucas was nothing if not thorough. That night, I only stayed in the hallway for a short while waiting for him to fall asleep, and then I went inside and I watched. I had adapted my sleep schedule a bit and I didn't need quite as many mango-flavored energy drinks that night. I made do with some of the chili carrot juice. Most of it was left on the table next to me though. I was too nervous and I kept tapping my foot. It echoed off the hardwood floor. Just short of midnight, Lucas started to stir. I got up and I readied myself. It was such a strange sight. In one swift motion, he went from sleepy into a sit-up to kneeling to full-on sprinting. I placed myself between the treadmill and the door, hoping to tackle him if he missed it. Luckily, he didn't. In 2 steps, he was on that thing, and the electric motor hummed to life. At first, I thought he would be too quick and accidentally tumble over it, but the dynamic setting kicked in and adapted to his pace, and seconds later, he was running at a steady pace. The bars on the side kept him straight. At first, I laughed. It was a relief to see it work. It was such a strange solution, but it was simple enough to do the trick. But all the excitement started to fade as I got a good look at him. His blank eyes, the wide open mouth. I couldn't get over just how alien he looked, and how misappropriated his body was. It really looked like he was using it wrong, like he didn't know what to do with it. And those eyes, there was something there. There was something behind them, something purposeful. It made me cold in my stomach, like I had swallowed a block of ice. Like I was watching something profound, something inhuman. Lucas had slowed down to a jog after about an hour, and fully stopped somewhere around 3 a.m. By then, he just stood there looking straight ahead with those white, dead eyes. Eventually, those eyes closed and he crawled back into bed. By 6 a.m., his alarm went off. He took a shower and he met me downstairs for breakfast, and I could tell that he was in a good mood the way that he hummed along with the radio. I told him what had happened and he was elated. "Oh, this is amazing," he laughed. "Just amazing. You have no idea." He finished up some pancakes, served with cucumber water and a few slices of an orange. He plopped down on a chair across from me. "I feel so energized. I ran it off. No bruises or broken bones, and just a little sweat. This is beyond amazing." "Well, I'm glad we could work something out," I smiled. "You think you're still gonna need my services?" "Are you kidding?" He dried off his hand and reached out to me. "I'm gonna need you at least 5 days a week, maybe 6 if I'm busy. This changes everything." I considered it. It'd be a challenge to stick to that kind of schedule, but the pay he offered would far surpass what I had made at the maternity ward. Besides, I could probably get used to it. Once I got him on the treadmill, the rest of the night was a piece of cake. And so I shook his hand and hoped for the best. For a few weeks, I got into this really weird routine. Waking up in the middle of the afternoon, shopping for groceries, doing some chores. Dinner was starting to feel like lunch, and I had to start moving my meals around. I got really into various podcasts and YouTube channels, and I would sometimes sit for hours on end without having to do anything. There were a few stumbles along the way, of course. Sometimes Lucas would slip, and I would have to guide him back to the treadmill. Other times he would roll out of bed on the wrong side, It was a bit of trial and error, but little by little it started to turn into an actual job. Sometimes we would go the entire day without talking, as Lucas would often be busy. But compared to how he had seemed when we first met, he was much better off now. Hallie told me that his hair had started growing back. It's gotta count for something. Still though, I could never get over the way that he looked at night. Those white eyes were burned into my mind. And then there was this one night in late November. I had been working with Lucas for some time now, and we were getting used to the routine. It was a bit tricky to navigate a working social life, but I managed to make do with the time that I had. We had figured out a schedule where I was working every other weekend, rotating the days in a way that Lucas never had to take his sleeping pills more than 2 sessions in a row. And that particular night was nothing special at first glance. I had prepped the last episode of the podcast that I was going to listen to. I had charged my phone, and I had gotten a glass of that carrot juice from the fridge. Lucas had settled in for the night, and the treadmill was all set up and ready to go. As he started to drift off to sleep, he turned to me. "There's this dream," he said, "where I'm running through a field, just this endless meadow. I have all these friends and we're going home. It's the final day of school, the first day of summer. And that sounds wonderful." "It is," he smiled. It really is." He turned away and sighed. "It makes you want to run." As he fell asleep, I got ready to steer him towards the treadmill. I was waiting for the sit-up, the kneeling, and then the sprint. It was routine by then, but I still couldn't get over that unsettling feeling that I got when watching him move. It had given me countless sleepless hours. When he started to stir, I was already up on my feet, waiting by the treadmill. But I could tell that something was off. He was slower than usual, more deliberate. In a controlled motion, he sat up straight, his head hanging loose against his shoulder. For a few seconds, we just looked at one another. Those white eyes rolled back in his skull. I could see his chest rising and falling quickly, like a panting dog. He closed his jaw, straightened out his head, and looked right at me. "Hello." The way that he said it made me shudder. It was barely his own voice anymore. It sounded feminine, dripping with hatred. Lucas's body language shifted as he rolled his shoulders. "Release me," he continued. "And go back to sleep, Lucas." With a series of fluid motions, he stood up in the middle of the bed, those white eyes still fixated on me. I could feel that block of ice churning in my stomach. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't having a nightmare. It was right there, and it was something far beyond what we had planned for. "You run." He grabbed a glass of water from his nightstand and hurled it against the floor. In one movement, he got off the bed and swooped up the largest piece of broken glass, wielding it like a dagger. I wasn't waiting to find out what he was going for. I hurried out of the door, shut it behind me, and used the bolt that we had installed to lock him in. I heard a deep thud, followed by a sharp tapping as the broken glass pierced its way to the door frame. I realized that I had left my phone in the other room. The pounding on the door stopped, and I heard footsteps fading away into the distance. For a moment, I thought that it was over, and then I heard a loud crash. I only had a few seconds to react. There was this strange drowning sound coming from Lucas, and I could hear it from outside. I figured he had made his way out and was heading for the forest. But no, he was coming back inside. I heard approaching footsteps making their way through the kitchen. I considered my options. I could go into his bedroom, get my phone, and call for help. But no, the lock was on the outside of the door. He could make it inside long before help arrived. I could hide, but for how long? And where? No, there was only one real option. Running. I hurried down the stairs and headed straight for the front door. I knocked over a metallic urn on the way, along with a chair and a vase with a dry blue sunflower. I could hear Lucas gaining on me, dragging something sharp along the walls. I looked back, but only for a second. His hands were outstretched, as if coming in for a big embrace. He held his sharpest knife in his left hand, usually reserved for cutting oranges. It scraped against the wall, leaving a long, straight line in the wallpaper. His head was swinging haplessly side to side, again deemed useless by whatever force was pulling him forward. And those eyes were still white as death, accompanied by an absurd grin. Every other step I heard him spit out a growling, "Run!" at me. He was much faster but had little to no control over his movements. He kept bumping into things, stumbling and slipping. Every time I turned a corner, I gained a few seconds. But he was clever, and I couldn't just run circles around him. It felt like no matter what I did, those footsteps were coming closer. I decided to take a gamble. It had been particularly cold outside and the grass was slippery. He didn't have much traction with those rubber running shoes. I figured with enough twists and turns I could make him slip. I burst through the back door past the terrace and into the open grass. Lucas followed, repeating the same word over and over and over with every step. "Run, run, run." He ran out into the grass but quickly stopped. It was as if he realized he wouldn't be able to run out on the surface. So instead, he dropped to all fours, his head dangling like a bag of groceries. He didn't need to look at me. He knew exactly where I was. I turned to run, but it was already too late. He was gaining on me. I heard the gallop of hands and feet coming closer. And then nothing. A breath later, I was knocked to the ground. It felt like the world had turned on its head as he slammed into me. I fell hard, twisting my ankle in the process. I had the wind knocked out of me. For what felt like an eternity, I laid in the grass, counting my breaths. My mind was disassociating, forcing to imagine myself somewhere else, doing something different, something far away where the grass was warm and the air didn't hurt. But nothing happened. Looking to my right, I saw Lucas lying face down, having those micro seizures again. He had had a bad fall, and I could see the edge of the knife poking through his collarbone. He must have landed on it. "Lucas," I wheezed. "Are you?" No response. I couldn't even tell if he was breathing. In the faint light coming from the house, all I could see for certain was the edge of the blade. It was covered in red. I slowly got up on my knees. I kept holding my stomach, feeling like I was going to be sick. That block of ice felt heavier. I crawled over to Lucas. The second that I put my hand on his shoulder, there was a loud snap, but not from him. I turned towards the forest. There were no less than a dozen people staring at me. White eyes gleaming from loose-necked skulls. Men and women, young and old. "We," said one. "Got," said another. "You," said a third. I turned to run, but I couldn't put any weight on my foot. Instead, I fell and was overcome with a dozen hands. One of them grabbed my hair, another my leg. They started pulling me away and dragging me into the forest, leaving Lucas to bleed out in his backyard. My screams echoed through the birch trees, rattling the leaves. I remember feeling bark against the palm of my hands and moss under my fingernails. There was nothing that I could do. The ice in my stomach exploded into a full-blown shiver as my body went into a panicked shock. At some point, it stopped. I was pressed against the ground, deep in the woods. We were in a small clearing where something had broken the ground apart. There was a chasm ahead, at least 20 feet deep, and something down there was moving. My captors had surrounded me, but one of them stepped out to the edge of the chasm. In between my screams, I could hear my assailant talking. "Yes," it said. "We join." "Eo," groaned the others in unison. "We run." "Eo." "We are blameless." "Eo." Four of them pulled me up by the arms, holding me aloft like a scarecrow. All the fight had run out of me, leaving me panting and crying. I could barely see them. All the light from the house was far gone, and the moon was partly cloud-covered. And yet, even then, I could see the reflections in their white eyes. An offering. Maybe Lucas was the intended offering. Maybe stopping him over and over made them consider another. I peered over the edge of the chasm and saw something stirring, ivory white and worm-like. A myriad of black spots in groups of two, like 100 empty craniums looking up. "Eo," they chanted. "Eo." I felt a hand loosen in its grip as something eagerly stirred below. And then a gunshot. Lucas's shotgun was meant for hunting quail, not people. But that doesn't stop birdshot from packing one hell of a punch. As the abductor to my right took a blast to the solar plexus, he lost his grip on me and tumbled into the chasm. The white worms below massed into a frenzy. I could hear tearing, biting, and bones breaking as the mass of white turned into a pinkish red. They dropped me flat, and I started slipping downward. Putting weight on both my feet, even my wounded one, I managed to steady myself. But still, I was inches from completely losing myself. I heard another blast and flinched so bad that I nearly lost my grip. They scattered, running in all directions, laughing along the way. Dragging myself back up, I took one final look into the chasm. It was empty. We made our way back and we called for help. Turns out that accidentally stabbing yourself was enough to snap Lucas out of it. When he did, he had called for help and got his shotgun and followed my screams into the woods. Neither of us knew what was down there in that chasm, It used to be some sort of pond that had been drained, leaving this large hole in the middle of nowhere. We filed a report for an attempted abduction, but it was difficult to keep our story straight. I tried to tell it like it was, but Lucas had switched a few events around to make it more believable. When things stopped adding up, the police had chalked it up to some kind of home invasion gone wrong. There were no arrests. In a strange twist of fate, this somehow cured Lucas of his sleep running. He explained it like a deep-rooted feeling that whatever had been trying to lure him out had sort of lost interest. Maybe they were looking somewhere else, or figured he wasn't worth the trouble. But even now, long after the fact, I still have nightmares about it. I remember feeling so helpless, watching the world pass me by as I'm drawn deeper into the woods. And sometimes, according to my husband, I've started sleeping with my eyes open. And when I do, my eyes are white.